I forgot to record it.
Okay, and generally, everybody there was about in their 20s to their 30s. So that was kind of the group I was hanging out with. So, next. So basically, I've put a lot of my things into these three categories: the host, the participants, and resolving issues. So the first is the host. And there's, for the one at the Mafia Cafe, he's Canadian. They don't really take pictures there, except for of the games themselves when you're playing them, just for people's like privacy purposes. Except for the one at Turtles is run by the person who owns the cafe. So she has like told people if you put pictures in the chat, they can't be used for public things. So yeah, so we have our Canadian from Mafia Cafe, and this here is she. She's in the middle, and that's probably the best picture I have of her. But so they kind of had different approaches to what they wanted to do. So Tim kind of just wanted to like create a group that was like to help Koreans practice English in like a fun setting. Which is exactly kind of what happened, except for the fact that most of the people there were not Koreans. Or if they were, they had like grown up in the States. So a lot of them were like just foreigners in general. Whereas G's Cafe, she had the intention of trying to get a lot of like internationals to come. When I talked to her, she was like, that's my goal. And she like asked me if I could bring anyone or if I knew anyone. And I was like, well, I won't be here that long, so that won't be very beneficial to you. But most of the time, the people who came to hers were Native Koreans who did want to practice and learn English. So it was kind of a mixed kind of response of what happened, because like these guys are all Korean, and then he was there for like a day, at least from that particular group. But yeah, next. Yeah, so the participants generally came down to like 4 different groups. So there were the regulars, the semi-regulars, the newcomers, and the one-timers / travelers, which sometimes correlated with newcomers, sometimes not. So they're kind of in that category. So here are a couple pictures of them, just for reference. So in this picture, there is, I don't remember all their names, but that's fine. He is a regular, he's like a semi-regular who started coming regularly. She comes every once in a while, and she comes, I think she came once, but it sounds like she comes more often. And in here, regular. I think he started becoming a regular and like semi-regular, and this is a travel from Malaysia, I believe. So really it like the atmosphere of the games came down to kind of who was participating in them. And so a lot of it revolved around the regulars, because they had like rapport with everyone, so that they could like break down the atmosphere a little bit. Especially I would say this guy right here, he like was a self-proclaimed game master, so he would like know every game and like know what would be best to play, and people usually like kind of went along with what he wanted, but he was also very good at like making sure everyone like had a say in what we were playing. Next. The last part was like resolving issues. So this is in Korean, but basically the gist of it was this guy is basically telling someone not to come. Because he like makes people, the person who he asked not to come, their name is technically down there, but I don't even know if that's their real name. He basically makes people like super uncomfortable, is really pushy for the games that he wants, and kind of things like that. Like he can't really read the atmosphere just because of his like personality. So generally people, it sounded like he'd been banned and he kept coming anyway. And so they like, this guy, I think, had the biggest problem with him. He made him super uncomfortable. He was like, please don't come. He's like, I'm just going to stop coming until I know for sure you're not coming, is basically what he said. And the host, G, she decided to make a separate chat that was private so that he couldn't see when things were happening. Basically, was the gist. And she literally told us to call the police if he ever showed up. Which he technically did, and he just left, so we were like, we're not calling. But, so it's kind of interesting, because also another group had kind of not the same issue, but they had someone who tried to get someone to go to a cult. And the person responded in the same way, saying, I'm not gonna show up for a while. And I think the person who tried to invite them to a cult just ended up leaving. So they kind of, it seems like people like just will choose not to show up until it's resolved by the host. Next. Yeah, so I guess kind of in conclusion, here's some more pictures. I feel like just the atmosphere all around comes down to like, or the sociality of it comes down to like, I want to call them like anchor characters or anchor people, that kind of like decide how it's like going to work. And making sure that like things stay smooth and fluent, and that like if there's any problems that they'll like resolve them instead of like leaving it up to the participants. Because if they leave it up to the participants, usually people will just stop coming, and that's usually not what the hosts want, so. Yeah.
We probably have, we have 3 minutes.
Jewish.
Okay, so can you say more about the mood of the group? What was it like playing cards with people?
Yeah, so it definitely depended on like how many people were there, but generally it tended to be like very playful, and like teasing, and especially this guy, he really likes to tease people. And so if people were like really good with that, like it would like lighten the mood. And most people,
You said?
yeah, like tease
Like
like,
how?
I think the only ones I really remember is the like that were directed at me, and they would always make fun of me for losing. But it's like, it sounds kind of mean when I say it like that, but like in the way that he said it is like, was very playful and like fun and stuff. And he always referenced wood. That was like his favorite. But yeah, so just like teasing, and I think of the right words. But yeah, so, and less competitive. Like there were people who were technically competitive. I never like saw it, but they would like apologize in the chat. They're like, I was too competitive today. And I was like, oh, you were? So, yeah, so like they were like trying not to be competitive and just have fun.
So that sounds like 2 really great themes that you could build out for your thesis. Obviously, you have time to do that, but the teasing, this is adult teasing, right? So how does that work in a way that you end up saying like, it didn't feel like it was offensive, you know? And then the less competitiveness of the games, less competitive, you know, there's an implied comparison there if you kind of flesh out what the comparison is. I had a few other comments, but. Okay, so, all right. A round of applause for John. Setting all this up, multiple computers. Somebody donated their computers.
Okay, so let's get into it. So my topic is negotiating in love in a global soul. Ethnographic stories of foreign women's interracial marriage, dating stereotypes, and support networks. So we're gonna get real into it because we got a lot to do today. So my main thing is something that surprised me was It's estimated that in 2025, 1 in 10 Korean men will be married to someone that is not from Korea. So that's kind of what drew me to the foreign, this kind of concept of multicultural marriage relationship. Okay, so main research questions. We have a lot about dating stereotypes. So how do foreign women experience the holiday contribute to challenge those stereotypes? How do Korean men and foreign women in long-term relationships navigate language barriers in daily communication, as well as what forms of kinship emerge among foreign women in Seoul as they navigate cultural adaptation and feelings of social exclusion? And then the last one that I really want to emulate is, to what extent is international marriage contributing to South Korea's racial and cultural dissification, and how is this trend received by older generations? So I just want to explain, next slide please, just kind of my methods. So I did a lot of participant observation. So I went to these organizations called Global Village Centers, which aim to help multicultural families in Seoul kind of adapt to the culture, learn the language. So these are government funded. I only went to 2 of them, but there's about 9 in Seoul alone, and then in other cities in Korea as well. They also do service opportunities so that they can get better visas and later on get citizenship in the country. And then YSP is an international thing by the UN. It's about like morality and like teaching values and things like that. Then the last one was Global Buddies, which was funded by the participants, and it was mostly international students as well as moms and wives here in Korea that just want to share Korean culture with one another and learn about the language. I also did observations in Hongdae, also Vanilla E-Mart, which had a lot of multicultural couples actually that I got to talk with on the street, and then I did some online work as well. So we're gonna show a video, so just kind of a transition. What's it saying? Okay.
If I have my sound on, it's gonna make it. Oh.
I'll just describe it. Excuse me. You lost. Oh, yeah, I'm just trying to find a bus stop. Don't worry, I'll take you. Wait, isn't that way Hongdae? Only if you're open-minded. So the reason I chose to do this video is because I spent a lot of time in Hongdae, and this concept of open-minded kind of surprised me, as I would ask some of my informants about what they thought of Hongdae meant, because I just came up in conversation. So Michelle, we would do weekly coffee runs together, and we would just talk about her life in Korea as a married woman. And when I asked her about what does it mean to be open-minded, like her response really surprised me, because I was thinking open-minded meant more like a frat boy hookup culture, as you can kind of take from the video. That's what Hongdae is kind of known for. But she was talking more about how open-minded her husband was into marrying her. And because he was very independent as a child, he was an only child, he would study English on his own, he was able to kind of break away from traditional cultural norms, such as marrying his wife. And then my sister, actually, she encountered a Hongdae man. So this is her story. You live alone is one of the other catchphrases that she was asked, and that she had the assumption that he just wanted, you know, like this hookup culture and stuff like that. So kind of going more into this concept, I wanted to go back to our readings that we read a couple of weeks ago about the one that I did the presentation on Monday, about the Mon, and like how it's like the mind heart, and like how like assumptions of Western thought can be devalued in a sense, and we can kind of see that in the Hongdae board. I need to go. I'll keep going. But so I did, another question was like, how do they communicate? So based on my survey, a lot of them just communicate in English. Some of them learn the language of Korean. Some even met on like Korean learning apps. Others communicated in their own language. So my other question was, how does kinship form between spouses? And these are all from different groups. So this one, we're playing with grannies in Hongdae Park. And you can see kind of like this interplay of spouse cultures. This is Michelle, she's from South Africa. And then this is my favorite Albanian who gave me field notes on the postnatal center. But I was just really intrigued by just kind of kinship that we found each other as foreigners in a country. They would always say, oh, you're like a younger sister to me, I'm gonna take care of you. Or like, I enjoy spending time with you. So based on like the statistics, like there's still more and more multicultural families that are happening in their family kinship, not based on actual kinship, but based on just the fact that they don't fit in. And so like that space, that sociality is built on like this feeling of exclusion and loneliness. And then just kind of going back to like the perceptions of the older generation, this video kind of demonstrates you're playing a game with the elderly, and we didn't really have a lot of words. It was very broken up English, but all stories that I've heard about like in-laws and like people talking with older generations about interracial marriage has been fairly positive. So they're very welcoming to us. And so like Michelle, she gets invited to weekend gatherings and such. So I guess my conclusion would be that like over 2,000 multicultural marriages happened last year. That's still 1 in 10 of married men in Korea or married women. The statistics for women married foreigners are much lower, but that's still very significant as it continues to rise and as the multicultural families in Korea becomes more diverse, right? So my main goal with my research is just to make sure that their voices are heard, and like I have a lot of narratives of these women that showcase their struggles, but also their success and how welcoming Korean culture and the adaptation of traditional norms are being changed.
So, thank you for your presentation. So your research is focused on the woman part, right? So you ever
I want to, in the States, I want to try to find men that married Korean.
yeah, but you didn't include, right?
Because I thought it was just my spirit, like no venture to it.
Okay. Right. Very great.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's interesting that English is the sort of the go-between language. I imagine English probably isn't first language for either in some cases. So I think that's super interesting just from a languaging perspective. Generally speaking, the topic is fantastic. It's really very, very relevant as your numbers showed. And so I think it's great to pursue this. The open-minded thing was interesting at the beginning. I thought it was gonna go more in that direction, but the resonances there were interesting. But it seems like, yeah, whether or not those are two different meanings of open-minded that are sort of being captured in those two different things. It was on. But I think your goal here will be to focus on some themes and figure out what those key themes that keep popping up across all of them are. And I think it's super interesting stuff. And yeah, I think it'll be great.
Try to go through your guys' first part, quick. You're ready to pop up as soon as you're ready. Made it.
Presentation black and white. Why is there no thing at all? Doesn't look like that. So I got you.
All right.
Okay, so my project was finding social belonging through cross-cultural, interpersonal, yeah, whatever. Oops, that's right. Okay, yeah, we can move on. So before coming to Korea, we learned, well, Greg told me recently that had been given the unique nickname of the Hermit Kingdom and had been historically cautious of outsiders. And even in Korea today, I still felt like that dynamic showed up in a lot of subtle ways during daily lives. And I'm sure you guys also experienced that a little bit. But my research has explored what it takes to build social belonging here, not just making friends, but to really break in and form meaningful cross-cultural interpersonal connections. So through my research, I focus on the concepts of Jong, Yunchi, Inyeon, and the role of serendipity in shaping these relational dynamics. And so I really wanted to find what insights can ethnographic engagement in Korean local spaces offer about cross-cultural relationship building and the co-creation of social belonging. So we can go on. So the first one was finding Jong. So Jong, as you guys know, built bond through time and shared experience. So when we first got here, we were definitely on the outside, and to be on the outside can feel somewhat isolated. But when you are on the inside, it can be very different. You are cared for, looked after, checked on, and this is something that happens without being asked. It's just what you do. So I feel like the first time that I was really accepted into Jong was at my friend Min's birthday party. When I got there, I wasn't just a guest. As soon as I arrived, she started introducing me to all of her friends. And it wasn't just like, hey, this is Sergio. This is my friend. It was, hey, this is Sergio. This is what you guys would have in common. You guys should talk about this. And so it was just a catapult into forming that relationship. And it was just something that I typically haven't seen a lot in the United States. So I thought that was a really interesting example of building Jong. And as the night went on and we were talking and all that, it just felt like the English, even though it wasn't quite there for all of them, wasn't really as important. It was more than enough to be able to communicate with all of them. A few days later, I learned about the concept of Nuna. So my friend Min is a little bit older than me, and I feel like this is another moment when Jong really clicked because Nuna is, as a guy, is something you would call like your older sister, and as a friend, if somebody tells you, oh, you can call me Nuna, it's moving from like friend or just acquaintance to more of like a family. And so really brings you into the inner circle of that person. So these are some of the pictures that I added about finding Jong. These ones are from the birthday party, and then this is one of my friends, Gigi. And so it just kind of shows everybody interacting and really being included in part of everything. So yeah. So next was Nunchi. When I first got here, I feel like Nunchi was fake. And as I started to just look and see the way Koreans interact with each other, it really started to pop out in unique ways. So one of the things was when we would go out to dinner with our friends, they would always pay for us so quickly, and it made us feel so bad. And I learned pretty quickly on that it's all about racing to pay. And so that's like the nunchi that comes from Jong. And so that was one of the first real experiences I had with nunchi. And then Another one was the one Greg talked about last week when we were walking with the street vendors and he said, "Oh, this looks good," and immediately ran over and bought it for us. And I was like, well, I didn't actually want that, but like, thank you. So just like what was talked about in the last one, words here, I feel like have a deeper meaning. And I feel like especially with Nucci, you have to be more careful about what you say, when you say it, who you say it around, because it can mean something totally different from what you would otherwise want it to mean. So, yeah, we can go on to this one. So this was just some of the Nucci that I saw in action. So this was the first time we went out to eat together, the tteokbokki, and right? Okay, and it was interesting because there was 4 of us this time, and they would eat, and then they would wait for us to get some before they moved on to getting some more. And then I added these 2 pictures. This is from rice farming. This was our farmer friend. He was explaining us how to do how to plant the rice. And I thought this was most similar to something that we'd see back in the States. Just with like a group around a central figure explaining, and everybody was really respectful and just listening. And so I thought that was a interesting correlation. And then this was just the pancakes where I was able to pay for it first. Yes, okay. I won. Okay, this is a topic that came up a little bit later on, Inyan. And Inyan is a fated connection, and it can come from a past life or destiny. And the concept really came up organically with our friends. So the first day I was in Korea, Johnny was like, "Oh, let's go to Lotte. I think they have a big supermarket there." We go to Lotte, no supermarket to be found. Somehow we end up on the 6th floor, and this girl runs out of this salon and is like, "Hey, come to this Airbnb experience." And Johnny's like, "This is sus." And so of course, Bella and I were like, "Okay, let's do it." And so we went, and we became really great friends with these people. And she always tells us that that day was Binyan and we were destined to meet. And I thought that just is really special. And because in Western culture, I feel like it's just seen as a coincidence, but Koreans often see it as relational fate. And it gives so much more emotional weight to the small everyday moments of connection. And being in the right place isn't just luck. In Korean though, it's also timing, harmony, and emotional alignment. So these were some good pictures of Inyeon. Our friend, when they were teaching us how to make some Korean dishes. This was the Airbnb dinner that we experienced dinner that we did. So I just thought, wow, these are all pictures that like what's so random that I'm here right now, but I guess it's destiny. So go on. So the last one was belonging and the Uri. So this one also I feel like came from breaking into Jong, and it's just the concept of like the collective, and so we started to feel a lot more like we us engagement, and so yeah, that was this, but it looks like I'm out of time. So anyway, these are just some photos that we took every time we hung out. So yeah. Anyway, conclusion. Belonging period doesn't come from quick words or open emotion. It comes from quiet moments, thoughtful gestures, and spending time. And throughout the slow unfolding of Jong, the awareness of Nunchi, and the sense of Bacon, I came to understand what it means to be truly wedded. Yep. Yeah.
So you analyze that the case that someone buys something particularly that is
Yeah.
into, right, a category of into, but so did you think about that as a example of charm? Why did you analyze it as a piece of your roots?
I think I analyzed it as Nunchi just because we had these experiences before, especially with like the payment stuff, and it just felt like she was reading the room. I mean, I feel like Nucci is a lot of the things you don't say, and so when it was oh, that looks good. In my mind, it was like, oh, that looks good. But in her mind, it was, oh, give me that right now. I want it. You know, in a sense, But that's kind of what I analyzed it as when I was looking at it, a new perspective.
So I think that'd be useful to expand out a little bit as
Yeah.
you develop this, right? To expand that out so that, because from a Korean perspective, it seems like she just asked for something. So it's like, what's the big deal? Why is that nunchi? Somebody asked for something and you get it for them? That's not really nunchi. That's, but the point is, from the American perspective, she didn't ask for anything. She just
Yeah.
made an observation, right? So to get both of those out so that it's clear, like, from an American perspective, this appears like, so I don't know at the end of the day, whether or not, maybe it isn't nunchi then.
I think that is, fine.
Yeah. Maybe a few
Complicated,
different
it's not a
concepts.
simple one,
Yeah.
yeah, I think.
It's not as simple.
But I fully understand.
Okay, yeah. Any other questions?
That's all you did, right on that.
All right, guys, I'm excited to talk to you about my project, which is called Sharing and Caring, and is an ethnographic field project that studies the physical manifestations of Jung in an elementary school classroom in South Korea. You may turn that. Okay, so my study took place among fourth graders in Handong Elementary School, which is located in Seoul. I went to the school and attended the Cheum Nuri class as a participant and an observer. I taught lessons, played games, completed art projects, and watched lessons for about 4 hours, 4 days of the week for 8 weeks. I also completed 2 formal interviews with teachers from Handong Elementary, as well as asking additional informal questions to Shushu, who is the classroom teacher. This one. And the principal, the students, and another 4th grade teacher named Miss Han. I learned a lot, and the information I accumulated, the encounters I had, the observations I made, and my personal interests led me to pay special attention to the relationships that exist in that classroom. You can go to the next one. I felt like the teacher, the students, the class as a whole actually cared about each other, and I wanted to know why I had that impression. What about the things I observed led me to the conclusion that some sort of camaraderie existed in Cheum Nuri? Subsequently, my question became, what are the physical manifestations of Jung in this elementary school classroom? After investigating that question, I came to the conclusion that Jung can be made manifest through sharing, specifically in terms of space, gifts, and time. So first, let's have a brief definition of Jung, just so we know what we're supposed to be looking for when I recount a few of my actual experiences. Jung is generally understood as, and this is according to the article that Kenya presented on Monday, a bond of affection or feelings of empathy to others, the emotional links among individuals socially, and an unconsciously formed psychological bond with somebody or something through contacts over time. So now let's talk about the anecdotal evidence for my claim. First of all, sharing space. Not only did the students learn together in the classroom setting, they also frequently participated in skinship by touching, hugging, holding, poking, pulling, brushing, nudging, kicking, or hitting each other. Skinship was a daily occurrence in Cheum Nuri, and as Greg has mentioned, probably something that I will want to code for specifically when we start data analysis. However, to give you a sneak peek into some preliminary numbers that I am not trained in analyzing, yesterday I recorded 30 instances of skinship in the classroom. 15 of these occurred among 2 or more boys, 12 occurred across genders, and 3 occurred among 2 or more girls. Of those 30 interactions, I observed 24 out of the 25 students, as well as Shushu, participating in or practicing skinship. In those cases, skinship took various forms, including holding hands, play fighting, putting arms on heads or shoulders, or even applying a bandage for someone else. Again, these are very, very preliminary numbers, but as a first attempt, they indicate to me that students are in each other's space frequently, and on the basis of that frequency alone, I would guess that they're comfortable there. They also indicate that skinship is not something that is particularly unique to any one student. Skinship is something that occurs throughout the class, and though it's certainly more concentrated among some individuals,
it could be indicative that the members of the class get along well enough to be close to each other physically. The next thing I observed is students sharing with each other were gifts. These gifts took the form of both physical items as well as talent demonstrations such as plays or musical performances. Some gifts were given according to some sort of behavioral standard enforced by Shushu, and some were given without expectation. For example, the class had a birthday party every month during which the birthday students receive a gift from every student in the class. The students in the class also coordinate and perform a talent show as a birthday present, which they usually practice for about 2 weeks in advance. Both of these are an expectation. Students are not given the option to sit out. However, there were also instances where students like Raewon brought every child in the class a present after he visited Vietnam. According to Shushu, he just wanted to share with the class. This was not an expectation, at least not one explicitly stated or enforced by Shushu. I think both types of presents are important. One is an example of Shushu training the kids to have jong, and the other is an example of students taking what Shushu taught them and applying it on their own. Lastly, the students spend time together. Students spend time together as a product of being in the same class, but the way they choose to spend that time and what the time means to them says something about the nature of their relationships. For example, Shushu recently asked Kenya and I to teach the class several games during their scheduled gym time. She asked us to do so because several of the students had told her that they missed us already and would be sad to see us go. Therefore, Shushu thought it would be good for us to spend more time with the students, and playing games together was the way she thought that could best be accomplished. So that led to my personal impression that spending time together by playing a game can be a sign of care, attention, and bonding, or more pertinently, a sign of jong. It is also true that the time we spent with the students when we played the games was somehow meaningful to them. Shushu told me later that one of the journal questions for the day was, "What are you grateful for?" and that several students had written something along the lines of, "Thank you for teaching the games and playing with us." During my time in Cheongnuri, a million other things happened that I would attribute to the jong that exists there. However, I do think it's important to note that my argument is not that jong exists in Cheongnuri. On Monday, Hye-sung told me that she doesn't think that jong exists in the classroom, while Jinu told me very confidently that he thinks it does. And besides that, I have no way of knowing whether either of them actually understood the question I was trying to ask. There were also students who told me things they love about their classmates and how they show that love, while others were visibly stumped by that question, and Chiwon actually covered his face with a book, looked at his friends, counted to 3, and answered my question by making an X with both of his hands. I can only take that to mean that either he does not care about his classmates or he is morally opposed to the question in general. My point is that I cannot claim that every student feels in Cheongnuri feels jong with their classmates all the time. No, that is not my argument. My argument is that when jong exists, it often takes the form of sharing, and that I can sense jong due to the physical characteristics that accompany it. By my interpretation, jong is made manifest at Cheongnuri through sharing. When the students share space, time, and gifts with each other, either willingly or by their teacher's encouragement, it demonstrates that a bond exists and that they're emotionally linked to each other as a product of the things they share. Jong means that 2 or more people care about each other, and sharing is caring. Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah.
Who was the one student not included in this kinship?
I need to look at that and figure out who.
That'd be an interesting one to look at, and it's same.
It was not.
Wasn't
No,
the same.
she won. And that's the funny thing is part of that like story that I told as I was reading it later is that Shiwon turned around to his friends and looked at them and counted to 3, and then like they were his friends that he was talking to. He's by no means
Yeah.
disconnected from
It'd
the
be
rest
worth
of the
digging
group.
in to try and figure out what that means. Those are interesting moments where it's like, wait, what exactly is he saying there?
Right.
Because it seems like we don't quite know yet. Yeah, I'll send you other comments.
Okay.
I'm still need to be convinced that sharing is the overarching thing.
Or-
So you can work on that as in the next one. I wonder if it's one of those pets to set free, you know, and just, you know, you can ask the question, take it out and see how does the logic and sense of the whole thing work? And I think it works pretty well. It's nice because it has a pithiness to it that summarizes the other 3 pieces. But I don't know if it's needed, so keep thinking about that. Anything else?
So you said that sharing is a way of expression of charm, right?
Mhm.
And I know that in America, there is the expression Sherry is caring. It
Mhm.
means that you assume that charm is also there in the US, but not the categorization.
Mhm.
Is it right? That I understand? Okay,
I would say so.
okay, great. I will think about it.
Okay.
All right.
Pete, you made a minute.
You guys can jump
You gotta
in.
do it back on schedule.
You gotta jump in quick.
Yeah.
It's not much?
Yeah, nothing keeps the line. Nothing. Yeah, it was okay.
And so, my research this semester has been on gesture and expressiveness in Korean communication. And, so my main research question that I guess I ended up developing was how do Korean speakers use gesture in face-to-face communication, and how do their beliefs about Korean expressiveness compare to their actual behavior? And the methods that I used to conduct my research was I did 24 structured interviews, like questions. And I did with 19 of those participants, I did a cartoon narration task gesture experiment. I also did two like formal 3-hour observation blocks at cafes where I just people watched. And I also went to some English classes to try and like document how syntax structure affects the language, and also how people gesture English versus Korean. And yeah, so I found people, my demographic was pretty split between males and females, and the ages I ranged from 20 years old to 80. So I met with lots of people. And okay, so kind of what the overall vibe of most Koreans was, or what they expressed to me, was that Koreans don't gesture very much, but I saw that they did. And so a lot of them, their view was that gesturing in Korea is seen as kind of disrespectful or distracting, like people will get distracted if you're gesturing too much in a conversation. And so they avoid too much gesticulation and, am I taking a
Is this,
question?
no, it's fine, sorry.
Oh, and, anyways, but and a lot of them, especially, it did a comparison to Americans. They were like, well, I mean, we do gesture, but compared to Americans, Americans use a lot of gesture and Koreans, we don't. But while watching them, I saw people use every single form of gesture that there is in like gestured, research, right? And vernacular. And especially beat gestures and metaphoric gestures, like people just kind of doing waving hands and things like that were super common. And it didn't really matter space either. There were people that were talking about trees and held her hands up like super high and stuff like that. And there wasn't much of a difference in space. Some people were taking up a lot of space, some people were not. So next, a lot of people, I tried to figure out like what the reasoning was between sports. Yeah, you can go next, yeah. What the reasoning was, so like age or gender, profession, personality, and then I had discussions of like societal expectations and Gucci and your upbringing and stuff. And there was a lot of mixed opinions on all of these. Like everybody kind of told me different things. They told me, oh yeah, I think the older generation doesn't gesture as much. Or people told me the opposite. The older generation gestures even more. And there are differences in what everybody thought. And there wasn't like a common thought across age range either. It wasn't like all the 20-year-olds were saying one thing. It was super mixed up. So we can go next. Basically the main thing that I did find a connection between was the people's opinions and as well as my observations that I found this was accurate is the speaker to listener relationship. So whatever the social distance is between the speaker and the listener was had a big effect on how the speaker used gesture or how the listener received the speaker's words using gesture as well. So when it was people that were familiar with each other, the gestures were larger, they were more frequent, and they used more space as well. Like at a cafe, there's a senior and a junior, and the senior was like leaning across the table, like had his whole body on the table, and the junior had his notebook like almost like coming off the edge of the table, like he was taking up a very small amount of space. And so they were like had this hierarchy, and the junior kept fidgeting, like touching his neck and his head. And one gesture that I did feel or find, I guess, to be uniquely Korean is the hand over mouth, like when you're laughing and things like that. Like, I guess it's when you're with a friend, it's fine to be like, have big reactions and facial expressions, but with somebody that you're not super close with, they would put their hands over their mouth to, I guess, be more polite when laughing. And yeah, so that was like the main thing that was the same, and we could go on. So my conclusions, oh, actually one other thing was people had a discussion, a lot of people mentioned like either politics or globalization as a factor, but when I tried to ask them what they thought, like how that was a factor, nobody was able to really like pinpoint anything. They were like, I don't know, but I think it is. So I don't know. But my conclusions ended up being that I think a lot of Koreans unconsciously are utilizing gesture, even if they believe otherwise. And the main impact that would affect gesture, because all genders, all ages, everybody, they're all using gesture in the same ways, in the same manners. But they would have differences based on the relationship between who they are communicating with. And so cultural assumptions do not always match actual interaction patterns. Like there isn't much of a difference between Americans and Koreans. And I kind of feel like gesture might just be a universal language. That's it.
So universal language is great, but what about the particularities? I'm curious if gesture might be a way of indexing friendship, of like producing, like it's one of the constituents. It's like John, right? These things that by gesturing with somebody, you're indicating a kind of relationship, or you're at least making a bid for a kind of relationship. So, and that gets me to asking another question. Is this just another way of doing speech levels? I'd be curious if maybe something to try and get at least one more cafe observation before you go to see this the degree of gesture, the amount of gesture, does it track with speech level, so that people using Panma use more gesture, right? So is this like
in the like senior junior university student relationship, the senior was speaking casually and the junior was speaking up to him, and there are other situations there that were also the same, or whoever was speaking casually to like their juniors, like they're three older men, and one of them was older than the other two, and all of them were being very gestural, but he was like taking up a lot of space with his body.
So Brown and Levinson, you may have heard of, they have some classic work on politeness, and this seems to kind of fit into politeness. This is not gesturing is a form of politeness. Gesturing is a form of impoliteness, but it's also a form of intimacy, right? And so power relations matter, that sort of thing. So anyways, just a thought.
I have a question. So you mentioned that when you asked the Korean interview, they said like, compared to Americans, I think like plus gesture class. But like, did you ask them like, where did they see the Americans? Like from media or televisions or YouTube or Americans they met?
I didn't specifically ask that. I had some people say, like, mention when they were just mentioning that the comparison, that from what they see on TV and they've said that. I had somebody else tell me that in her English class when she was in grade school in Korea, when they gave presentations, they had to like one of the things in their curriculum, I guess, was to specifically be gestural. And in her script that she was meant to write for whatever her English presentation was, she had to put in gesture cues also, because to the Korean teacher that was teaching English, gesture is important to Americans.
I was curious because I think if I speak another language, I think I use gesture more. Or if the person is from another country, even though I'm speaking in Korean, if the person, her or his first language is not Korean, I think I tend to use more gestures at first. So like how did you kind of control that factor in your
So in my interviews, it wasn't super easy. There were some people I interviewed that were fluent in English, and so they were speaking more casually, but it still was like they weren't speaking Korean, so that could have been impacting how they use their gesture. And then in other interviews, I had a translator, but even then, they could have been like using their gesture differently, even while speaking Korean, because they know that I was there and watching them. But for the main, I guess, distinction in that regards was the cafe observations and me just watching Koreans speak with Koreans and they weren't aware that I was stalking them.
This is my requisite Hangul, so you know I'm legit. Okuchan, this means ping pong club. My research was on ping pong, which meant that I went and I played a lot of ping pong. I got about 8 informal interviews with interpreters. Well, one without an interpreter because the guy spoke English. There were over 30 regular interlocutors that I regularly saw and played ping pong with. I got lots of data and I wrote a lot. It was good. Next. If the video plays, because people don't really know, like I say, go play to the ping pong club, doesn't mean a lot. This was my last. I know that's tragic. The next one, don't worry, it gets better. It gets better. It gets worse. It gets worse. Oh. Oh,
Lucky shot.
lucky shot. I'm sorry. Sorry.
shot.
Sorry. That yeah, no mion hamida. Sorry. So yeah, ping pong. Usually I'd go in. There is, if you go back to the picture of the place, there's like cubbies where people store their shoes. You go and take off your shoes at the door, put on your new shoes, go sit, maybe wait for someone. Then you might warm up one-on-one singles, just like 4 forehand, lots of reps. Maybe you'll play match with them, or maybe you'll go and do doubles. You're either sitting, watching. There's also like a row of couches behind this blue barrier. Sitting, watching singles or doubles. So then you can go back. So my main research question I've got is, what role does the structure of playing ping pong in the Korean Ping Pong Club have on the sociality therein? And the claim that I'm making with my data is that play is largely organized into singles and doubles, where singles acts as something to train and prepare for doubles, which is a place for play and more relaxed socialization. This is a characterization. It's not strictly true. There's also singles for fun. There's also, right, it goes outside of this, but this general structure is, my claim is that this is broadly accurate for how socialization in the sociality works in the ping pong clubs. So my 2 specific stories, these aren't the most the generic form is that singles is often like almost meditative, in how it, like it's very rhythmic. You go forehand to forehand most of the time. Sometimes you switch it up, sometimes you do other drills, but most of the time it's forehand to forehand. Just go back and forth, trying to have like a long, good rally, get in your reps. Sometimes, like if you watch the coaches, the teachers give lessons, they'll even go like han, duel, han, duel, han, duel. Like it's very tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. You get in the zone a little bit. Whereas doubles is more relaxed. There's more chatter. People will make exclamations and celebrations between points, and they'll talk to each other, and you play with a bigger variety of people. But these two specific stories, here we've got Driller and Ice. All the names are just to help me remember. Driller, I called him Driller because this story is where I first like remembered his face. And he was the person in charge of the drills. These two were just hitting together. At first, they're just hitting together, but pretty soon they started doing like really deliberate exercises with each other, where Driller would like stop in between points and talk to, and usually there's not talking in singles. This was interesting, but he'd talk in between like every point, and he'd go through and he'd show the proper technique to eyes, and he would like show him where the ball was supposed to go. He'd be like, this is the ball I'm going to hit to you. This is the ball you're going to hit back. This is what it'll be. And then they'd go through it, and then they talk about it. And then they go through it, and it was very much like a lesson. It wasn't, there's only two teachers, and neither of them were teachers, but it very much felt like a lesson. They were very focused on improving their game. And then in the next match, they were partners for doubles, which is relevant. The exaggerated story, like I'm not exaggerating the story, this is a real story, it's the most exaggerated version I saw, was Losers Pay. This was just on Tuesday. It was hilarious. They were so loud. Like doubles is always louder. They're chatting, they are like excited when they win the points, they say sorry when they hit a lucky ball. But this one was there was one point in particular, it like echoed throughout the whole room. And I didn't know why it was so intense in particular until Hyun had come to help me interpret, and they pulled him over and had him like keeping score for them. And he talked to me afterwards, and he told me that the reason it was so intense was because they had bet that the losers would have to pay for drinks afterwards. Which is awesome. It was so dramatic. Here, this one it was so dramatic. There were exclamations. There's a loud one. At the last point that the lady lost and one before it, she had like a gimme, right? She was supposed to put it away, and she lifted it and she collapsed onto her knees and started wailing like 20 seconds straight in this position. It was hilarious. It was amazing. And that's not something I had usually seen, and it's something I would only see in doubles, because doubles is where, even though they're competitive and intense, the intensity is geared towards like sociality, right? They're interacting with each other. It's pushing them towards something they're about to do outside of the club. So you can click it. So in my overall analysis, conclusion for this is that singles ends up, they kind of work together. So that singles is where you go to train and prepare. There's often this teacher-student dynamic where you're helping each other get better, even if they are like the same level or the same age or something, they'll still take turns being teacher and student to each other. And I had plenty of experiences with that where you get into this thing where you like play out the point and you try and do it, and then you give the other person a chance to serve so they can try doing the tough ball, and then you take the turn and you kind of give each other advice. It's quiet and focused, and there's often more regular hitting partners. People tend to like to do singles with the same people. Doubles is like play. Right? This is where instead of preparing for technique, you're just trying to have fun. There's more vocal, you're more vocal, there's more like exclamations, more celebrations when you win, more tragedies when you fail. And it's more peer-to-peer. Interestingly, also like how teacher-student, even when they would otherwise be equal, this is peer-to-peer, even when otherwise maybe they wouldn't be. Like people who are more skilled would do worse on like you're supposed to not do your best serve if they can't handle your serve, right? So you kind of, it evens out in doubles. And there's also more varied matchups, like you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to, you just end up playing with more people. And so you get a broader kind of social sphere, you meet more people. And then other stuff that my data had that I'm waving at you. That I can't really talk about for various reasons, but I might dig deeper into for write-ups is this stuff. I would be comparing it to stuff outside the ping pong club, which I just don't have data for. This is interesting. I just these all three I think are interesting. I might look at further in the write-ups. I just can't talk about it now.
Quick, who usually pays for drinks? Do you know?
I don't know. That's not something I'd seen before.
Yeah,
that was kind of an exaggerated thing.
yeah.
I was told that someone was gonna offer to go take me to get drinks once. And that's the second closest that I've ever
Yeah.
gone
So
to it.
anyways, this is to say, it's interesting that the competition, the most intense competition happens in the most playful genre.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
or the playful kind of game.
Mhm.
One question would be, where else is there competition? Just something to think about. And then the other one is, why do you say sorry when you hit the lucky bubble?
Etiquette. Oh,
So,
like,
yeah, but what's the logic behind the etiquette,
like,
you know?
I didn't deserve that point.
Uh,
Like, that was not, I'm sorry about that. You do that in the States too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and that's common, and it's common, and it's like, it's common to the point that it's codified. Like, they have a sheet of etiquette paper that I had Hyunbi translate for me, and it's on there too. I didn't have her translate it for me until like a week ago, but it's, yes.
Okay.
But yeah, it's, I didn't deserve it. I took it, like,
Yeah.
that wasn't fair play.
Huh.
But it's still.
Is that different with the experience of a complete US? Your experience?
My experience with ping pong in US is not terribly comparable. There are clubs in US, but they're fewer and farther between, and they're not as tight of a demographic. This one is very consistent, like, everybody in that club, barring a couple of exceptions, is gonna be like ages 40 to 70. They're largely like, they report that it's for exercise, that's to stay healthy. In the States, it's mostly like minorities, lots of Asian peoples, that go and play for fun. And the vibe I get is it's like something that brings those minorities together. Like, it is a community thing first, and then maybe exercise. But that is total conjecture. I've only been to a ping pong club in the States one time.
Was the same age group
No.
of the States?
Yeah, all right.
Hopefully this sound comes out okay. If not, sorry, I don't know what to do. Do audio. All right, you have to be quiet to listen to this. Oh, I need to turn off the sound on that.
Excellent. This is my presentation of my preliminary findings for my ethnographic research project. To begin with, let's see if that will go away. Okay. My original research question was about the psychological and physiological effects of Buddhist practice on San Buddhist lay practitioners. I was able to develop my research over the course of 8 weeks, visiting 4 temples, interviewing monks and lay practitioners. I was able to have approximately 11 interviews with more to come. And I visited approximately 25 worship services, also known as the Achin Yebul, where the Buddha, it is also called Buddha worship, as we were able to find out on Wednesday. The methods that I used during my project centered around using observation, as I was accustoming myself to the proper etiquette around Buddhist temples and Dharma halls, through using participant observation by participating in some of the rituals as I was invited and encouraged by the community, in interviewing the different members and lay practitioners, as well as attempting to use shimmer devices which track the biomarker data such as pulse and other related biological data that practitioners may be experiencing while they are participating in the practices that we'll be addressing later on. The data collection centered around a primary, secondary, and 2 tertiary forms of practice that I was able to discover. I say discover in the sense that I was able to learn more about them and find out that some of these existed, not in the sense that they were secret. The first one is prostrations. This is the most common form of worship that I've seen in Korea. Meditation follows soon thereafter and frequently overlaps with the other practices. Chanting can involve the reading of sutras, and it can also involve the reciting of mantras, which can be short phrases or longer passages. The reactions that were described to me about the various practices differ significantly depending on who is telling me about it, but they follow some general themes. The first is the idea of attaining mental peace as well as physical relaxation, and also that of strain followed by release, whether this is physical or mental. The examples that I would like to share center around these different forms of Buddhist practice that I was able to engage with. The first is prostrations. I was able to learn from several different interlocutors about the different experiences that they have had with prostrations, and I'd like to focus on the psychological as well as the physical benefits of these. I think I said that right. The physiological effects of prostrations were very interesting to learn about, and several practitioners described to me that they are able to feel an emotional release when they participate in regulation in prostrations. And I took this to mean and had it confirmed to me that prostrations can be a form of emotional regulation, which is highly important in order to alleviate psychological stress, because psychology and physiology are incredibly combined, and prostrations are able to help with both aspects. Some practitioners were also able to articulate to me that they felt more at peace after doing them, and like their bodies were able to rest more completely after the fact. Psychologically, many practitioners were able to tell me that they were able to face different parts of their subconscious or of their mind and reach deeper into themselves as they did more and more prostrations. Prostrations are frequently done in different quantities. It could be 3 prostrations, it could be 108, 1,000, 3,000, or 10,000. These obviously differ in quantity, strain, and time, but it would seem that more benefit is gained with more prostrations. I've seen this in myself because I was able to psychologically benefit from engaging with prostrations because I experienced a number of mental health challenges during my time in field school. And I realized that I was using my time at Yonghwasa, where I was engaging with the community on a regular basis, as a place where I could find this sense of emotional regulation and attain this emotional stability that I needed internally, and deal with some of the disappointment or distress that I was feeling and find the sense of relief. Additionally, prostrations can be termed active meditation, as they were. This was the term that one of my interlocutors used. She was able to describe to me that meditation can come in many different forms, and another interlocutor was able to describe that meditation can be anything as long as it is helping us to be more aware. As we're able to become more aware, we can attain more mental peace. And many of my interlocutors were able to describe to me that they felt lighter, or their minds felt more calm after they were done meditating, or even during the process. One did mention that thoughts come and go, but that it isn't terribly distracting for her. And that she's able to let things move aside. And this was also the practitioner that was able to name to me that she feels that she has better blood flow and higher oxygenation when, I think I said that correctly, when she participates in meditation, and that she overall feels healthier. While other practitioners mentioned to me that they feel that they are able to recover more quickly from illness when they engage in meditation and prostrations. Number 3 is supposed to say chanting. Forgive my error. But chanting can be a common practice in different parts of the ritual as well as in personal practice. The sutras are parts of Buddhist scripture that, or perhaps just holy writing, that detail the teachings of the Buddha. The most important ones that I've been able to learn about are the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra. One of my interlocutors was able to tell me that she tries to read the Diamond Sutra on a daily basis in 2 separate chunks, and that in doing so, she's able to imagine that she is at the site where the Buddha was teaching this sutra originally, and is able to find a bit of peace in doing that. So we again see this theme of finding mental clarity and a sense of peace, while mantras function in a very similar way. They typically function by having the practitioners engage with a specific phrase or sentence and repeating it over and over. The one that I have participated with most often is during the Achimyabul, where we will chant the name of the Bodhisattva of compassion, the Kwangseum Bolsar, and we will repeat her name over 100 times, perhaps 200. I know this because we typically hold prayer beads in our hands when we are engaging with the mantras, and we'll move one bead at a time with one thumb and shift the necklace a little bit at a time. And this allows for counting, but also to keep track of where we're at with the mantra and to maintain a steady pace. On one occasion, when I was at the temple that I visit regularly, one of the volunteers came up to me and was able to show me through her example that if you take the beads and move them just once per each repetition, it's a significantly slower rhythm as opposed to the faster rhythm that I had been doing in order to try and deal with my anxiety. And by intentionally slowing down physically and focusing on the words that we were saying and following that rhythm, I was able to gain a sense of inner stillness. And I've been able to frequently enjoy this practice inside and outside of the Dharma halls and feel that same sense of relief. What I make of the data is that Buddhism as a philosophy or as a religion is able to help people to experience a higher quality of life and increase their overall happiness and sense of well-being. Practice provides methods for regulating emotions, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, achieving overall wellness, as well as increased awareness of what the practitioner is experiencing in their life and their ability to cope with it. The practice is centered around acknowledging and becoming aware of the practitioner's lived experience and finding a way to accept and move on from this as needed. This is best accomplished as a habitual practice, but it would seem that even small and infrequent doses are able to provide benefits. Further research is necessary to determine to what degree practice provides relief. However, I believe there's a strong correlation. Thank you for listening.
So Shauna just went to the bathroom or something. Maddie, you're up right now. Yeah.
That was mine.
Oh, oops. Oh, that's right. Yours is here. There we go.
I like this. That's I like
All right, you're good.
So it's my presentation. I did mine on dance and how to perform connection events. And so, and also, my first thoughts was, I thought it would be pretty competitive, and I was wondering if the like, the relationships would be strained or forced, because I always heard that Koreans were super competitive, and so I wondered how that would turn out. So I collected data by doing interviews, observations, and getting involved. I interviewed and talked to about 12 people, and I took 7 dance classes. And I went to maybe 20 times. And so here are some of the answers to my question I asked. Was was like interested, middle school, elementary school, and like started in university, but was interested since elementary school. And most of the people are interested in K-pop first, and that's how they started. But there's one teacher at 1 million whose mom was a samba dancer first, and that's what inspired her second. And so why did they choose K-pop? And some people were like, oh, it's very familiar to me, and the dance styles and the variation. And everyone, they enjoy it, and there are lots of experiences. And like people like certain groups, and so they get into and most important question, how did you form connections about is the dance community like? And so my favorite answer is so I asked Hutton from SMBs about this, and he said it's dynamic. It's different in grade school and in university. Generally seen as the layman's and people dancing are focused on studies, but become like a subculture and looked down upon. But in college, it's seen as something cool to be proud of. More people start dancing in college because they couldn't before. And then I was a student. So it seems like lots of people like to support one another. So I did something different. Once I went to this traditional dance performance with people, and it was really cool. And this video is one of the ones that the class I took at 1 million. I'm in the back, but don't.
Wow. Whoa.
That's awesome.
Just.
And this was a ones that I made a while ago. It was like this, it's called Painters, and they did art and while dancing, and they did lots of like body. So answers, what is dance community like? So it's very supportive. And it's not too hard to get connected with the community, at least if you're in college. So I have a video. But this next slide. Yeah. I don't know. This one is like a performance of a busker group that, and the guy is teases him at the end.
Which guy?
With that dance, then he came up to you.
Well, there were two.
I don't have access, so. Take your word for it.
I guess that's all. Sad.
Okay, so your question was, how the community was built through the dance, right? So when you say the community, what do you mean exactly? So I'm just wondering, do the dancers, they have a meeting after the class, or?
I mean, community as in, like, an interest group, like people having a relationship.
Having a relationship with each other?
So what do the relationships look like? I guess is the question. Like, like, is it just you go and dance in a room together and then nobody talks to each other? Or is there another dimension to the relationship? You all just dance together?
With like the dancers in the community, they're all very like supported and teasing each other. And when I, then like at SMU, it's the K-pop club there, they are very interested in what they're doing. And they're very passionate for it. And you see the passion that they have, and it brings out their performances. They can see it.
Do you have anything to say? You mentioned the Koreans are competitive, at the beginning. Did you have any more to say about that part?
Well, I thought that they would be more confident,
Yeah.
but I realized that they're very.
Yeah. Very cool.
I was gonna make faces as well.
There you go. Okay, so Shauna Wilson, Career Field School Research Presentation. So this Omapum event, I found out the week before we were leaving from another adoptee that's in the Seattle area that I'm gonna actually be meeting up with this next week. She's flying in her family. But I was actually really kind of wanted to throw up when I actually saw this. It felt very concrete. And it's not like I'm like, oh, duh, I was adopted, but it just felt very much more real as far as that aspect of it. And yeah, so let's go to the next slide. Obviously, that's kind of what I'm researching. My research, this is very loosely, and I've talked to Professor Shin, it keeps changing. So I don't know what it's actually going to be when 6 years, when I actually finally do a thesis or something. It says, how and why are Korean adoptees finding kinship by involving themselves with each other, by searching for personal records and discovering what Koreanness means to them. And I feel like that's kind of what all of my data, like all of the people that I've found, the interactions that I've had, everyone's kind of trying to figure out how do we connect as a community of Korean adoptees, but then how much like Koreanness are we and are we not? There's some people that really wanted to engage, other people that are kind of more standoffish, but then others who are living here, have been living here for the past 10 years. They have their businesses. So it's been a very broad aspect of the Koreanness part, but then the fact that I was originally, when we first started this, these two said, you're not gonna be able to do this adoptee community. You don't have time, you can't find anybody. And here I am. So I thought that has been a unique aspect because honestly, and Greg had mentioned this too, like this is my own personal journey as an adoptee. What is this gonna look like? Me coming in after the first 2 weeks is like, can I just go home? I'm over it. I was like, I don't wanna do this, it's too hard. But the pictures that I have here, so this is the community center, this is the government building. And this is where I discovered that I'm actually officially on a government record here in Korea. It didn't start that way, so that was actually a really kind of an epiphany, like I'm official, like I'm on a government document. This over here is my first actually the second interaction at the Jeonbuk Public Library. They have housed a lot of chokpo, which is the ancestral books for Koreans. And this gentleman here was actually able to find some information on my Korean father and some on my Korean mother. So that is different because the chokpo is not a government thing. So I didn't understand that there's two kind of sides to this. You have this historical family genealogical things, but then you have Korean government. Why I'm doing this, I'm really gesturing. But you have Korean government and you have to be able to kind of like meld those to try to figure out all of these things. And so the reason why I have this with my name tag and then my name in Korean, but this right here, this organization, Me and Korea, is very symbolic. They have what they call mosaic tours that you have to apply for. Obviously, you have to be an adoptee, but they go through this experience that you can have to experience Korea as an adoptee. Some people might do this fairly recently when they decide, hey, I want to jump in. I know other adoptees that have come back and forth for like a decade. And the lady that I'm going to be meeting up with, she said we should both apply and see if we can go together on this mosaic tour. So it kind of blends those things because you can also do a birth search. You can do, they'll help you kind of connect with those things. I thought that was kind of an interesting aspect as far as that. So that's why I included those pictures. That next slide. Who are we? How do our narratives intersect? Doesn't matter. A community is a group of people who share an identity forming, I know you don't like that word, forming narrative. This means a group of people who share a story that is so important to them that it defines an aspect of who they are. I felt like when I was kind of trying to figure out, you know, what is this community kind of thing, this definition kind of vibed with me. Like that, I was like, you know, we share narratives. We all started here in Korea, but we've been scattered across the globe. And like, what makes it so that we want to be together? What makes it unique in as far as the parts of us? And I included this right here because the meeting that I went to at the National Assembly Hall, these are all the global organizations that said, hey, we want to support this. We want to see what's going on with the Korean government as far as, and I talked about that on Monday, so I want to reiterate that. But I just thought this was really cool. All the different representatives, people who, this is a new conversation. This hasn't happened. There's no history as far as that. It's kind of been like swept under the carpet kind of feeling. So the fact that I happen to just be here in Korea, this Omapum happened, this is happening, and I'm like, wow, this is like incredible timing. I do feel like it's a gift from the God that I've been able to participate in just some of these things. This other one here says, thank you to all individuals and organizations around the world who have signed on in support of the forum. We know the turnaround was intense, but despite the time crunch, so many of you have stepped up and offered your help and support. So there was an email that this group sent out that's saying, hey, if you're going to be to this meeting or if you're supporting our cause, please sign this letter because this is going to be going to the new president of Korea. So I feel like this is a great opportunity for these conversations. Go to the next one. Okay, so I didn't realize it was gonna be so big. That's kind of cool. I've never done a Google slide by myself. Just like I was like, shut you cough. Charlotte had to help me with some technology, but I've never had to sit down and do this by myself because I was like, hey Mallory, can you help me out? So I don't know if she's on, but I kind of managed to put a collage together. So these are just some of the adoptees that I've been in contact with, and this one right here in particular has been very meaningful. The first Saturday that I was here, I felt like I needed to show up to this English class with Denise and Charlotte. I'm like, I have no idea why I would need to show up to an English class. But I met an elder that is serving here for our church. He is from Germany. And when I told him that I am a Korean adoptee, kind of coming back, figuring out my life, he said, wait, my mom is a Korean adoptee. She was adopted to an LDS family in Germany. And this is Oki. We're great friends. We talk. And something that I just want to really share really quickly, and I'm out of time, is the fact that we just talked the other day, we're both wearing yellow. Thought that was kind of fun, but she said, and this is more on maybe like a spiritual sense, she said, I feel like the Lord prepared me to meet you. She said, for years, I have not been able to look at an Asian woman. I don't want to see them. I don't want to interact with them. I don't want anything to do with them because of the trauma that she experienced when she left as a 7-year-old. So she's explaining this to me, but she said, a year ago, I had to sign up for a class that I had to get some training so I can work at this doctor's office. There were 2 Korean women and a Filipino woman, and she said, I didn't know if I was going to be able to get through this class, so I couldn't stand to even look at them. But she said through this year and just sticking it out, she said, the Lord was able to help me be at peace. And she said, and then my son met you, and we've been video chatting and messaging, and she said, I feel such a kinship to you. She's like, I feel like we're sisters. And so that was just like, she just told me that the other night. I said, I said, I feel like it's a miracle that we found each other. And she's actually having her son, there's a member that's helping them try to access some of her government records. So that's been pretty cool. I can't tell, yeah, these are just, oh, this one, actually I have to tell this one. So this is the first Korean American adoptee in the army that reached the brigadier general level. So I thought that was pretty cool. He came as a 10-year-old, but yeah, these were just all the different ones that I was able to include on this slide. This one's actually an online one that she lives in Utah. She was the one that in the middle of the night, I'd gotten back from Paji, it was like 2, 3 in the morning. And this is an LDS church in Korea. She had asked about a particular man that had helped with her adoption. And I was like, wait, I know this man. I actually have a picture of myself with this man. And so we've been connecting, trying to figure out some record things for her as well. So this is just a small smidgen. Conclusion, I feel like I have just begun. I know most of you are gonna go home and like say, hey, like I'm kind of can look at all my field notes and figure out stuff. I just feel like I'm kind of tipping the iceberg as far as responsibilities. Family Search has asked me to do some things for them as far as being able to figure out a way forward for adoptees, Koreans looking for genealogical information and trying to find like a succinct way in which to organize it. So that's a whole nother gig of homework. So anyway, that's
Quick thoughts, community or kinship, I think you have to have both, but I think you have to recognize how they're different. And delineate how is community different from kinship, because I think they are different. That's.
But I feel like the kinship was within the community, or you can find it.
Possibly,
Okay.
but the point
Okay.
is, you need 2 different terms there.
Okay.
Community, there's a community of adoptees, and there's also kinship, which is sometimes in the community, sometimes.
See, I didn't even include my interactions with my Korean family.
So the other thing about kinship is to recognize kinship can be different in different cultures. How you do kinship, right? That's the whole anthropological side of this. And what that means is you can have 2 cultures that are interacting around kinship that have 2 different ideas about what kinship is. The classic example is the Oceania example that I sent you a couple articles about, where one side sees, oh yeah, adoption, you do this all the time. It's no big deal. The other side, adoption is this big thing. So in Oceania, adoption is no big deal. In the US, it's a much bigger deal with all kinds of trauma and other things associated with it. Oceania,
In
that's
Korea.
not there. And the question would be, where does Korea fit? Is Korea more like Oceania? Is Korea more like America? But what that also means is that this, where adopting is valued, like financially valued, it means that this culture can, when they interact, it can turn into an exploitative relation, which has been the case from Oceania to the United States. There are multiple cases of people today, some of them even members of our church, who have basically been trafficking in children. I don't know, I think that's too harsh a term. They
Modifying.
were doing adoption, they were doing paid adoptions, right? They were
Right.
making money off of
Yeah.
adoptions by bringing people from Oceania where adoption is this common thing that you do all the time. But it also oftentimes took the form of closed adoptions. So adoptions, one of the things they do is they create relationships with other people. And so you can see from this perspective, you're expecting to create a relationship with Americans. And yet what ends up happening is it becomes a transaction, a financial transaction, and the relationship is cut. And that's how it becomes exploited. So the thing to pay attention to is different understandings of kinship. And the key thing here is what's the understanding of kinship in Korea? And how does adoption fit in? I still don't quite know the answer to that. I know adoption is, adopting out kids is fairly common within families, it seems like, or at least in using. Maybe 50 years ago, which would be the time frame we're looking. But maybe not so much anymore. Where
I don't know, maybe I
people
don't
live
even
with,
know if that's
parents
like
and
the
all-
research question, I'm just,
Yeah.
just for today's presentation, it was like.
Yeah.
This,
Yeah.
I don't know if you
Yeah,
guys.
so
have
these are
any
the things to
yeah,
think
okay.
about. And then the other thing is the fitting it into the birth rate challenge, right? This is, Yoon Suk Yeol called it a national crisis. The birth rate, the lowest birth rate on the planet of any.
Well, the craziest thing is so the last two adoptees that I have, they're 20.
Yeah.
The fact that they're as young, I mean, they're my kids, yeah, they're so young, that it's still
I
happening.
think that.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Usually.
Are you good?
Okay, so this was, my research was, centered around Koreans and foreign relations. Next one. So my question was basically, how do Koreans build relations with foreigners and foreign cultures? So the past 8 weeks, I observed in different settings that portray Latin culture, mostly through food and dance. So that includes like a lot of Latino restaurants, dance classes, and also musical performances. I also observed intercultural interactions in these settings, and then also spoke with Korean and Latinos about their experiences, while simultaneously observing my own experience. So first, with Latino representation that I saw, Latin culture was received really well and positively in public. So like I saw this performance of these Mexican dancers, and the people there loved them. They danced with the kids and they ate that up, and people were cheering so loud, screaming encore. So like it was really positive. And there was also this Brazilian percussionist group. They're not actually Brazilian, but they were actually all Korean, so that was interesting. But they were sharing the culture, and people really loved it there. And then these are also some of the different restaurants that I went to. They were all kind of different with how they represented Latin culture, and it didn't really have much to do with who owned the restaurant, whether they were Korean or Latino. Some of them seemed a little more like they were American influenced than like actual Latino influence. But some of them did a really good job with like making it really authentic, even if they were Korean owned. Then the Koreans, from the Korean perspectives, I met a couple different Koreans who were all really like fascinated by Latin culture. all of them, the ones that I spoke to, they all really loved Mexican food. Mexican food is really popular. I found a lot of restaurants. So all these Koreans that I met, they were all really, they like went out of their way to make themselves a part of Latin culture after they like became exposed to it. So this dance instructor that I met, she was introduced to Latin dance through like a Chilean friend of hers. And after that, she like just fell in love with it. And she went to Mexico and Colombia and learned how to dance and then became a dance instructor. And then even started doing dance classes so that she can make more friends and like foreigner friends. Then there's my friend Jin. He's the one that moved to Colombia. He lived with a Colombian family in Australia, and that's how he became like that's how he learned about Latin culture. And then after that, he wanted to learn Spanish. He started learning Latin dance and taking classes, and then eventually moved to Colombia and is getting a job in Mexico. And he also did this YouTube channel so that where he just did street interviews so he could have an excuse to like meet foreigners and make friends with them. And then these are also some Spanish speaking Koreans that we met. They just they just wanted to learn Spanish. The one in the middle is Danielle, and he like was introduced to it by a friend who lived in Spain. And yeah, after that he just studied Spanish for like 10 years, lived in Mexico, and then always keeps up with the Mexican embassy's like activities that they post. Yeah, and then lastly I made some Korean friends. So from my experience, being a foreigner and making Korean friends, they really liked me. I felt like I was received really well as a foreigner, and as our friendship grew more, we got to see more of like the Koreanness of being friends with Koreans. So that included like skinship. It actually surprised me when we first met our friend Min, this one. She like greeted me with a hug, even though I didn't know her. So that was kind of surprising to me I didn't think that was like a Korean thing. But over time, she just like always kind of like touched me. Like she always just like rested her arm like over my shoulder, or like, and they would always like touch us by like moving us if like a car was passing and stuff like that. And there was also nunchi, a lot of nunchi, like my friend Gigi right there. She would always just pay extra attention to like little things that I would say and like just remember them all the time. So I went to her salon because she's a hairstylist, and she was like, "Oh, I have the perfect treatment for you. Like, cause I know you said that you wanted a massage, so we got like a little scalp massage for you ready and all that." And then did all of that for me. And I felt really bad because I felt like I had to practice more nunchi because I felt like they cared more than like what I was showing. So there was a lot of nunchi like that, and there was also, we learned about inyan, which is what they kept saying, like, that we were meant to be friends, like, because, like, you just happened to be in this spot in the mall, and I just happened to be on break, like, our friendship was inyan, and so, they attributed our friendship a lot to that. I felt like I had a different experience from other Latinos because when I mentioned, because whenever they talked about their friends, they only talked about their Latino friends, and then when I asked about their Korean friends, they were a little more iffy. They were like, "Yeah, not Korean friends," but like they wouldn't say much else about it. Yeah. So in conclusion, Koreans for the most part don't really know about Latino culture, but when it's showed and like exposed to the public, it's received really positively, and it's really sparks their interest and like passions. And also Koreans seem to be open to having friendships with foreigners, but in order to make a closer relationship with them, like foreigners probably need to be more aware of those Korean aspects of being in a friendship. So I think I was lucky to have already learned about that stuff before coming to Korea, because I think that had a lot to do with how I became good friends with these Koreans. Yeah, thank you.
Good question. So do you think that you were well received by Koreans as your foreigners or as you foreigners who have a Latino?
I think just foreigners. I feel like there wasn't as much like Latino specific.
Okay,
in
the question is that I have now is that, but you first opened you opened the presentation with a Latino culture, right? So I just wonder how you want to make the link to that Latino culture and also the friendship in Korea toward foreigners.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I was a little more in general, so we did share a lot of like our like Latino culture with them. Like we made like conjugation with them and like talked about making like Mexican rice and stuff. So like we shared that with them and they like really enjoyed it. And our friend Min especially, she had like traveled a lot and like really loved Mexico and like Mexican food and stuff. So we went to like taco restaurants with them. So I felt like from them, like they had a positive impression of Latino culture already. And yeah,
It seemed like you had said that somebody, who was it that only talked about their Latino friends?
just like some of the Latinos that I met.
Oh,
So, yeah.
okay. Okay, so I had the same concern about there are two pieces here, right? So you have the first piece, and the question is, what's the bridge that connects it? And I think the bridge is Eleni Lopez's research, right?
Yeah.
So that's the way you get, so we didn't hear about it, but that really sets up the second part, and gets us to how do Latinos experience Korea, right? And so I think that would be the bridge that connects the two, and it really sets up the second part to be really interesting. Because she found that people were saying, oh, everybody's so cold here, and that's not what you found. So it's not to say she's wrong, or that the people she talked to is wrong, they just had a different experience. And yeah, because they were on the outside of Joan, you were on the inside.
How long ago was that research?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Oh, it's fairly recent.
Yeah.
That's very different.
So for me, we have stereotype or prejudice, like Latino culture seems to be very passionate and energetic, right? Do you think there is any kind of relationship between Koreans, individuals with personality that matches the Latino culture?
Well,
Like, do you think most of the Koreans that you met who love Latino cultures are pretty much very extrovert?
oh, no, not really. Like the Koreans that I met that were really interested in it they were like I guess what you would expect from normal Koreans, like maybe a little more quiet, but like friendly and stuff. So yeah, I think they especially the dance instructor, she was a little more like excited and like passionate, but she was like, but yeah, so maybe there was that.
We're 10 minutes behind, means we choose our break time. We still want a short break?
No break, no break. This is.
Are we okay with no breaks? Okay.
To be clear, the treats are infinite and eat them all.
The treats are infinite, so.
That-
You can stand up and stretch if you'd like, you know.
Let's do a 2 minute, yeah, stand up so that you.
The Buddha, put your hands together.
Oh, by the way.
All the time. Yeah.
Problems
Stop.
It's the good dying right now. That's what the Buddhist monk says. What is the difference between goals and babies? I tried to connect to the other direction you're on. Yeah. I think the babies do like I turned it off and connecting to the other. And now. I would make it also. I like they go like. I'm gonna go take a pee.
Or wait, it's not whether, yeah.
The other things I don't think really could be so like that.
Dad?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
LOL. They don't have the right.
There's they.
I want to have new skates, the ones that have pockets. I have.
Like
I have four, yeah, one side of it, yeah. That one.
Alright, I got the one with the sausage. And also was called.
I wish that were popular. I'm having it on the. Is that so? I feel like that should be great. Wait, they still always hold you like. Everyone that you know.
All right.
I feel like, yeah.
So, my note machine.
So, like, yeah, right? Why?
It's a Russian base.
Are you guys ready?
Yeah, that was good. Let's go. Back on the grind.
Back on the grind.
Grind waits for no man. Yeah, but only because it is unrealistic. We're trying to beat it out of it.
Sorry, I feel like we're blocking you.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, hold on, I need to share this.
Film and theater. Remember back in the day when we were like, I can't do project on this.
And here I am.
Here you are.
Trying to do a project.
So I realized, maybe if I do this, people can see, well, if I'm so down, I could have done it. Anyway.
Well, I didn't realize that the title of it stuff. Just click again. I can't not say.
Okay, little effects I didn't know were there. Okay, my project, film and theaters fostering connection in South Korea's third spaces. Okay, so my little introduction, the research question that I'm trying to answer right now is, how do film and theaters operate as a third place for intercultural and cross-cultural sociality and connection in South Korea? So kind of to define my terms, when I talk about third place, I am referring to this sociologist. He coined it in his book called The Great Good Place. Ray Oldenburg is his name, and it came out in 1989, but there's been a sequel actually that came out this year too. So they're still kind of building on this idea. And it's a place that's separate from home, which is the first place, and work/school, which is the second place. And its main goal should be to foster community, social interaction, and belonging. And in his book, he said that there's 7 main characteristics that create a third place, which is that it's open and inviting, comfortable and informal, convenient, unpretentious. There are regulars, conversation is the main activity, and laughter is frequent. And something that I'm claiming is particularly Korean about theaters as a third place is these last two, that conversation is the main activity and laughter is frequent. So my main claim is that film screenings and festivals in South Korea serve as a vital third place, facilitating unique forms of intercultural sociality and cross-cultural. My methodology for this field school over the course of, like one more time. Yeah, I know this so fun. I observed for 8 weeks attending film festivals, screenings, and discussion groups. I had casual conversations with around 20 people, but it might honestly be more than that. Semi-formal interviews with 3 and structured interviews with 3, and then I actually have a couple more interviews lined up to happen later this week. The first thing that kind of clued me into this idea of theaters as a third place in Korea is the infrastructure itself. From my experiences going to theaters in America, they're kind of very focused on just getting people into the theater, watching the film, leaving. Here, there's always big seating areas for people to sit down. Like this is a independent theater I went to that has this whole area for seating, and there's another side. This is like the outside too that had seating areas, and it was a film cafe as well, so people could go and order food before they saw the movie or after, and then could come and sit at these tables, chat about the movie. There's also a seminar room in this building, so people could reserve that for even more structured discussion about movies. And this is at like a chain theater, so they have like the Lotte theaters, CGV is a chain here too, so this is at a CGV one. And even though it's a chain theater, which you would think would be less catered towards belonging, connection, discussion, it still had this large seating area, which they call the film lounge, which I think is kind of a fun term too for the third place. But and there was always, I mean, you can see lots of people sitting around chatting about the films that they just watched. So my first thing that I looked at, if you want to click one more time, was film festivals as communal hubs. This was a key site for me, the Seoul International Senior Film Festival. It happened over the course of a week, and it was specifically catered towards senior citizens, but it was open to anyone to attend the screening. This is like a little red carpet they had set out. This is just, these pictures are really blurry, I'm sorry, but this is like their kind of logo that showed before every screening. And then this was from the closing ceremony. This was like all the directors of the films that were shown. Not all of them because it was international, but like the Korean directors that were able to come and the awards that they were presented with. So I feel that the notes kind of repeatedly emphasize that the attendees' punctuality, enthusiasm, and their clear enjoyment of watching someone with other people. So I felt like I witnessed a lot of connection between these people as they sat and watched films. They would sit next to each other. So I think that the senior citizens were especially interesting to observe because they have a lot different theater etiquette than maybe we're used to. They would have full-on conversations out loud during the film screening. One person like answered a phone call during it, but they just like had a full conversation out loud and nobody cared. But and they would also share their snacks with the people sitting next to them. I was able to have that kind of connection too with these two old ladies that sat next to me and shared their food with me. They also would often bring out tissues, use them themselves, and then share with the people around them. But when it was like a particularly like emotional, not like blowing their nose, but like dabbing their eyes, okay. But when it was like an emotional film that we were watching. So that was really interesting to be able to see that. Go to the next slide. Another important site was the university film clubs. So I was able to interview 3 members of 2 different film clubs at SNU. I need to figure out if this is actually what they're called in Korean, but there was one called Bolshong, I think, and that's like the central film club. So it's just dedicated to all film. They said there's about 500 members, which I thought was crazy. It was like one of the biggest film clubs biggest club at SNU. And then there's SM Film, which is specifically ethnographic film club, which had about 40 members. And from this interview, I was able to find that they have a real sense of community within these film clubs. One member noted that people who enjoy films are generally connected because they need those kinds of things. So all of the members of these clubs have kind of a need for film in their lives, and they gravitate towards these places where they can find other people that have that same priority. They can form connections that way. The film clubs also present a very important idea as discussion as the core thing happening. So the strong point of the movie clubs is that I can share my opinions to others, and members actively discuss like the social states of the movie characters, storylines, and the movie music was important too. The shared interest is a large reason that they form this connection. As I said, the connections are easily made through shared tastes, especially for those interested in indie music and indie kind of media. That was brought up a lot in this interview that I did. And film acts as a common ground, and members often find they really connect on other things beyond just film. So I'm kind of interested in how film and theaters present the event that people are attending, but then they're able to form connections beyond that. But as film as like the medium to create those connections. All right, and then intercultural and cross-cultural dimensions. A lot of the films that I was able to attend were also international films. There's a lot of different international film festivals that happen in Korea. So the exposure to international film shows people different kind of ways of living around the world, communities. I found that it teaches empathy. In the discussions that I've had with people, they say they like to see these other places around the world because It makes them feel more connected to people that maybe they've never learned about or met someone like that, and they can still feel connected to them through the screen. Film clubs as diverse hubs, the interviewees mentioned that the film clubs have people from all different majors, all different schools of thought, and so they can come together and kind of compare their own backgrounds and bring different perspectives, and they're able to learn from that. And the cross-cultural sociality, one specific event was this Mexican embassy screening. There was a lot of Korean people and also Hispanic people, and they were able to connect over that, and lots of Spanish was being spoken there, and I thought that was interesting. In Korea, that Spanish was the main language being spoken, and they're able to connect with other cultures through film as the event. So the third space characteristics. Yeah, a neutral ground and leveler, accessibility and accommodation, sense of home away from home, and then the conversations as the main activity, which I think is the most Korean thing of all the characteristics there. They have the seating where people can converse, and it seems like a lot of people take advantage of this, and they like to hear people's thoughts, and not just the people they came with, but other people that were in the screenings. They chat to strangers. I think that's another large part of this, is the stranger connections and stranger sociality. So in conclusion, my key takeaways are that film offers a unique platform for public sociality and discussion. Theatrical and club settings enhance shared experiences and provide a dedicated space for this focus. And these spaces foster both intra and intercultural connections by bringing together diverse individuals around a common interests. And kind of my broader implications that I'm looking at right now are contributions to an urban social life. I think that this is a very specific to cities, since that's where people want to find connection. It can feel isolating, but by looking for connection, I can see that. Community building and cultural exchange, especially for university students as well as senior citizens. Thank you.
So I'd say I appreciate the breadth of your data, so nice job with that. I'd say stay with the data more for now and really kind of work on what does the data have to say. So if you're, I don't know if you're doing 543.
Yeah.
So spend your time with your data trying to figure out what does the data really have to say. I think there's an interesting connection here, but I don't know how to make it. And there could be a couple different ways to go. Robert Putnam has this American scholar, talks about Bowling Alone is his book.
Okay.
He's talking about the increasing isolation of people. So I also kind of wonder if that might not be the real story here, is about the way that there are public spaces being created for people to come together, and they're needed because people aren't coming together in other ways as they maybe once did,
Right.
you know, something like that. So alienation, you started to talk to,
Yeah.
started to get to it at the end. And there's another guy from 100 years ago that wrote on the city, and so as you were talking about the city stuff at the end, he's a German guy. It's not coming to me. But talking about the anonymity of being in a big city,
Yeah.
and how that makes it, you feel like a different kind of person when you move through a city as compared to a small village, right? Because people will acknowledge you in the small village.
But city, everyone's isolated. You're just another person. in
Right,
that.
so
Yeah.
so these kinds of things might be what the story is really about, rather than the connection. The international stuff kind of depends on, and intercultural stuff will really depend on the topic of the film, obviously. So I don't think that makes a good umbrella for
Yeah.
you, because you have the senior citizens. That's not necessarily what they're doing, is the international intercultural stuff. So I'd say kind of set that stuff aside for now and really focus on, okay, what's the data? What's the corpus of data that you have? And what does it say? The infrastructure stuff, I think is super interesting. All that, how people, the sociology in the theater.
Yeah.
It's really super interesting. All that is wonderfully cool. So stay with that, keep building it out, and I'll tell the story and see what it has to say.
Question the concept of the third place. So do you think that the theater is the only example of the third place, or the other places can be the third place?
Like in a
There's
broad general
Yeah,
term,
yeah, yeah.
I think that there's like lots of third places.
Okay.
I've also like thought of that looking at other people's data, like Parker with the ping pong clubs or Emma with the board game group. Those are other fantastic third places that are present.
Amen to that. And I feel like you guys can share these concepts across each other too. Thank you. Past Master John, good work.
Parker's having the real assist here. Layup with the timer, good job. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so what I decided to do my research on is how Koreans interact with the dead through rituals and practices. So I'm just gonna go through the what I did, how I did it, where I did it, and with whom. Super easy. So first off, I chose Buddhism, rituals and practices. I went to a ton of different Buddhist temples, visiting the really far off ones in the far, far away lands that were like 2 hours away from my house. Actually, well, when we went to like Busan and those areas. Staying at the temple stays, talking with the Buddhist monks, doing Buddhist classes, learning about why funerals and ancestral rituals were important and what they believed in and how people gained closure through these practices. Next, and I did like 20 to 30 hours a week on just Buddhism. We'll say 20 hours a week on Buddhism. Next, I did a Buddhist class where I learned how to play these instruments, plus another one, it's a gong, but I didn't want to put it up. I don't remember the names right now, because I'm blanking, but these instruments are all used in both Buddhist rituals as well as shaman rituals, which I found very fascinating, and I'll talk more about it later. But Alex and I both did this class twice a week. One class was for 2 hours, the other class was like 3 to 4 hours for 7 weeks. And we made a community, we're able to interview all of these people about Buddhism. I looked into shamanism. I went to group ceremonies. That's one we did yesterday. Antikuk, which is where shaman does it once a month just for her own benefit. I also was able to interview experts on shamanism fields and Buddhist fields. Those experts were like Mr. Suk, David Mason, Dr. Yang, this shaman, this one specifically, who is a very high shaman from what she was saying, talking about just shamanism and their experiences and why ancestors are important for them as well. Go ahead. Next, in general, just general population, I did both formal and informal interviews with a lot of different people, like my homestay parents, my homestay mom and her daughter, or people from the Buddhist class. We also had from YSP that I went with Cami to. We talked about ancestors and why they were important. And this is Dr. Yang, if you guys were curious, and that's David Mason. And then there's a couple other professionals in the field at some of these group ceremonies. I was able to contact and just keep in touch and ask questions to them. Next is Confucianism that I looked into. We went to a ton of different mound burials as a class, which was really very helpful for me. We also went to museums. I went to museums and other burial sites around Seoul that would be a Confucius burial site. Go ahead. I also went to Seoul National Museum, observed there. I did not do any interviews, but I did find it interesting that while I was here, you can do one more. Oh, just kidding. Oh, it's later. Okay, while I was there, I noticed that both Buddhism and shamanism was practiced and like put alongside each other. And the pictures will be in a couple of slides later. But from what I've gathered out of all of these, talking to people, watching people, doing everything like that, I learned that Buddhism and shamanism are actually very similar to each other. They both believe that ancestors do
play a role in your life and they have control of what is happening, whether it's good or bad, and to appease them, they have different rituals, but a lot of times they have the same instruments or articles they use to appease those ancestors and the spirits surrounding you. For example, this place specifically used to be a shaman shrine, but now it's a Buddhist shrine. I don't know why the Buddhists decided to take over this shaman shrine, but despite that, they both Buddhism and shamanism use the same spot to appease ancestors and spirits around them. This was actually the Seoul National Museum. Here you can see a lady performing either a Buddhist ritual. She was doing like, not a Buddhist ritual, but like a practice. She was going through her beads, chanting. She has food out that you would normally see at a Buddhist area. Then you could also see like a Buddhist sign right here. The picture I wanted didn't upload, but there was the shaman signs as well as Christianity, all in the same area, monumental area. Here, this is Buddhist tree, and this is a shaman tree. But the tree's doing the same thing. This tree is pushing away bad luck. People come here in the mornings to get good luck for them and to like deter bad luck. So it has like this tree has a spirit in it. This tree is also spiritual. Shamans believe that there's a god living here, and they did a ceremony. That's why there's red and everything like that. They did a ceremony to bring out that god so that it could protect the people around them, specifically the village at the time. And then I watched this movie with these lovely people, thankfully. And I found it interesting that these people in the movie, they used both Buddhism, like monks, they used shamanism, they used geomancy, they used like all of the different aspects of the Korean culture religions to appease and fix whatever their ancestors needed or the spirits needed at that time. Go ahead. And then these are also some compare and contrast that had similarities. So these are just the instruments that were similar, showing the Buddhists and the shamans, Buddhists, shamans, bells. So in conclusion, I found that Koreans don't really discriminate that much when it comes to how they will appease their ancestors, especially if they're having a hard time, and that they are okay with relying on both shamanism or Buddhism or Confucianism. There are outliers of like Christianity doesn't believe and doesn't want anything to do with that, but that's not what I studied. That's the end for me.
I thought it'd be good to mention that shamanic buildings can be present at Buddhist temples.
Yeah,
So
that's strange.
that kind of thing is an interesting mix. I was curious with the rocks, how did you know they're a Buddhist shrine now? Like, how do you know?
So
Buddhist.
with that,
With
the area specifically,
remember the rocks that you had on the data and conclusions data?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that area has a history, a great oral history as well. I think right into just oral.
I don't know.
Professor Suk showed us it. There's a shaman shrine right below it, and then there's also a Buddhist shrine right below it too, like a Buddhist temple. They are pretty close together, like neighbors. And the history he told us was that the rocks used to be shaman. You can see markings from where they did some shaman practices, specifically for fertility. And now there is Buddhist symbols and signs saying like, this is a Buddhist shrine, do not practice shamanism here.
Oh, it says do not practice.
Or it was something along those lines,
Oh.
yeah.
You get any pictures of those signs?
I'd have to go through my camera roll. I don't know.
Yeah.
I got pictures of the shrine and I'm sure
Have your
the
poster?
thing is good. My
Have your
poster.
You didn't post her
Yeah, I'm doing a poster.
on Tuesday?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, what would be good?
Are you gonna put the JJ Memorial stuff, is that factor into your data at all?
I'm thinking about
Think
it.
about it.
Yes, there's a lot I can do.
Very quick question, so your project is really interesting because you found a mixture of this shamanism and Buddhism, but I'm just wondering, have you ever talked with the people who perform their ritual? I mean, they can share the materials like tree or rocks, right? Does the practice different, would be different, I think.
So like the participants,
Perspective.
well,
They can share the material, but the meaning of the practice cannot be shared, I think.
that's interesting you should say that, because actually I feel like after yesterday, I can say I've sort of practiced a little bit, because we went to a shaman place and she told us some things that would result, she said, into doing a goot for the spirits around us. It personally made me feel like, oh shoot, like, I don't know if I love this, but it also had my mind open to like, oh, this is why people would want to do it. And we did talk to some practitioners about their experience, specifically with shamanism. Not so much, yes, actually, no, the answer is yes. It did, and it made them feel good.
Okay, just as a preface, I don't really have any pictures of like the young women because youth stuff, so I just use pictures. Okay, so my topic was Korean young women of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and how they cultivated a sense of belonging. Okay, my research question as it stands right now is how do adult leaders of Korean young women in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints foster a sense of belonging for their young women? I kind of started with youth religiosity and then how collectivism played into that, but then I realized that the young women actually were not that close to each other, and the belonging that was created was formed by the leaders, and so I looked into that. Okay, this is my data. So where, when, who, and what. I went to 2 different wards, very creative pseudonyms on dual wards, and I went to church, which was Sunday school, young women's, and sacrament meeting, where I sat with the young women. And then I also attended seminary for the past couple weeks. It was obviously May 22nd to July 13th, 8 Sundays of church and about 3 weeks of seminary, which was Monday through Friday. And then around 15 young women, ages 11 to 18, young women leaders, Sunday school teachers, and seminary teachers. And I was looking at interactions between young women, as well as interactions between young women and their leaders, and then how the leaders fostered participation during lessons and meetings. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over a few examples of data that I have that I think fit best with my question. So this was an interview that I had with a young woman leader who was actually the president of her class for 4 years and then was moved to second counselor. And she talked about her own experience as a young woman, as well as her experience being a young woman's leader. So she told me about how she struggled when she was a young woman to make friends. And she actually said that her motivation for attending church was her young women's presidency. It was her adult leaders because she had a really good relationship with them. And then talking about her own experience being a leader, she said that they have the young woman teach lessons, and the way they do it is they have one leader and one young woman work together for about a month and communicate and discuss what they learned from the scriptures. And so it's that really reciprocal, very intensive process of having them teach a lesson. So some claims that I get from this. The first one is that leaders foster a sense of belonging by establishing personal relationships between themselves and the young woman. And we can see that both in the example from the young woman leader when she was actually a young woman, because she said that her relationship was more with the leaders than with the young woman. And then also she's talking about with her own young woman that she's over, saying that they actually have that one-on-one relationship which ties into the second interpretation, which is one-on-one communication and shared responsibility are used intentionally to teach the young women. So that's something that they have purposefully done and integrated to teach the young women and actually have them teach each other. Okay, this is from a Sunday school class where the leader had passed out these papers that Minjung translated, and they had terms and definitions that they were supposed to connect. But there are these two young women who are pretty much always on their phones. They're the youngest, they're both 11. And so they were not doing the activity, and one of the leaders knelt on the floor next to them and handed them pens and whispered while showing them the paper. And then the girls looked up, put their phones on their laps, took the pens and connected the terms where the leader pointed. So going to my clues. The first interpretation I have is going back to the one-on-one interactions. Participation is encouraged through one-on-one interactions between young women and leaders. So this leader actually had to go down to literally to their level to talk to them and have them participate because they were not doing so with the community at large. And then the second interpretation is that active involvement on the leader's part incorporated the young women into the group, which intentionally created belonging. So again, the young women were not originally part of that kind of belonging because they were not taking part in the activity. But when the leader put in that active involvement to bring them into it, that's when they started to be part of the community. Okay, this is I think Sunday school again, and one of the young women leaders had brought in a birthday cake. And the interesting thing here is that the leader, who was actually the same one who I interviewed, hugged the girl whose birthday it was from behind, and she like folded her hands over the girls and closed her eyes. She was like making a wish with her. And the girl actually like leaned back into the young woman leader's hug and was grinning, and everyone laughed. And so the leaders gave the girl gifts and cards. And they would also, it was kind of funny, the leaders would start saying like, wow, and then everyone else would start saying, wow. And so they were all saying it together. This is not the cake, but it was a basket cake. So. Okay, so my first claim here would be that the young woman leader has a personal and reciprocal connection with individual girls. So not only was she putting in the efforts to bring in this young woman into the community, but the girl was also doing it back, leaning back quite literally into this leader's hug. And so that was a reciprocal connection. And then the second one would be that inclusivity started with the leaders and was adopted by the group at large. That's seen with them all saying wow together. So yeah. Okay, and then this is seminary. And this leader had drawn something on the board and then erased it. And she drew this, that was in my jottings. That's exactly what the trees looked like. So there were 3 trees like that. And as she was drawing it, she said, I should be having Gil draw since she's so good at drawing. And this was one girl who was pretty much looking at her lap for the entirety of the class. But when this leader said that, she raised her head and looked up for a couple seconds. And then later on, we have the leader said, believe it or not, these are trees. And then the other students laughed. And the other girl said, that's such a tree. Those are beautiful trees. And the teacher was like, oh, 감사합니다, and said, thank you, and laughed. Which, yeah, such a tree, beautiful tree. Okay. Okay, so my first one here would be that the leader fostered a sense of belonging through both acknowledging and affirming the interests of the young woman, and participation was encouraged as the leader engaged in reciprocal interactions. Okay, what is interesting about this? So pure culture and respect to superiors tend to be heavily emphasized in Korea, but the young women, though similar or the same ages, do not seem to be close. So leaders take it upon themselves to foster a sense of belonging. And these are all kind of backed up by various quotes that I've had from leaders. So an FSY counselor said that pure culture is very important. One leader said that she would not say that the girls are close. 6 different individuals that do not work really well. And then one of the seminary teachers said, girls like me because I was more, and she like punched my arm playfully. And she said, I was open to the girls, so they liked me.
Quick question, the leader getting onto their level, how do you know that the students felt the sense of belonging I just wondered, isn't it possible they felt the exact opposite? You know, like being singled out or like that action could have produced the opposite thing. So how do you know it was belonging?
I guess it's a good question. I think because they began to interact with the young woman and there was some like laughing and smiling and they were talking with her and also talking with each other. And so there was more of a positive reaction to it instead of just like, oh, we have to like on our papers. It seemed very positive to me.
Do you think the society life for the young women in general, like going to school, has affected the sense of belonging at church?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one of the biggest things I saw. That's why I changed my question because the young women are so busy, like 24/7. And most of them are in different schools, so they're not like friends with their church friends. And they also don't have activities, like church activities. So that's just another reason they don't have time to really bond with the other young women. And they also, like, they have their school friends, so they don't want to have their church friends, you know, it's kind of that in-group sense. So I do think that affects it a lot.
A young leader, young woman leader, is a kind of charismatic person, or does or who has authority for the children, or just a friendly person.
Yeah, I would say it's interesting to see how they like strike a balance between being a teacher and being a friend. Because they're like encouraging that reciprocity and saying like participate in the lesson while also like, I don't know, talking to them as a friendly kind of like, oh, here's something I know about you as a person, but also let's do this lesson, if that makes sense.
I think that would be a really interesting thing to think about is how do you navigate the equality and the hierarchy, right? The effect of the grasshopper teacher in the CCC, right? How you do both these things, creating, if they're really creating reciprocity and equality, but they're also still saying, you need to do this. That's an interesting tension. All right. What are your hand signals, Parker? What is this?
Fine.
This means
-30, -1, -130, -2, -230,
Oh,
-3.
the thumb is 30.
This is hard. This is hard to see and it hurts my hand.
This is very big side.
This is 5.
That's 2:30, yeah, that's all right. You're fucking off.
Okay.
Oh, this is my favorite one, yeah. Sorry. What, 1.5 minutes?
So my research was about, how teacher-student relationships affect the shaping of Bunigi in the classroom. So I'll talk about my research site first and then my questions. So I went to Hangdong Elementary School with Paige, and this was our class Cheung-Nuri. And there were 25 fourth graders in that class, and this teacher right here is Mrs. Song, who was the teacher of the class, and I spent most of my time in her class. As Paige said, we went 4 days a week for about 4 hours a day, and we taught them some games, we taught them some lessons, we participated and observed in their class generally. And I also did some interviews with another teacher named Miss Han, whose classroom we observed in for 1 day only. My research question was, how much control does the teacher have over the classroom 분위기? And if you go to the next slide, 분위기 is a Korean word that kind of encompasses mood, atmosphere, ambiance. It's like a vibe. So it's a mood that exists not like of a person, but the mood of a space or of an interaction between two people. And so I wanted to know how the teacher is able to control the 분위기 in their classroom in general, or how much control they do in fact have over that. And so one of the conclusions that I came to from my research is that the teacher is able to control the 분위기 to the extent that the students respond to their actions. And so because of that, the relationship that the students and the teachers have is really, really important to the level of control that the teacher has over the Buniki. And in one of the interviews that I did with Mrs. Song, she said that the kids are natural mimickers. So she had been talking about how sometimes they copy how she acts, and so she has to pay attention to that, but she also said that they naturally know how I think, maybe by the words or actions that I do. And I want to illustrate this with an example from class. So generally in Cheum Nuri, the mood was what I would consider bright and fun and playful. When I talked to the kids about it, they described it as good and fun. But one particular day during break time, the kids were all running around, playing card games, chasing each other around the room, yelling, laughing, all over the place. It was general chaos, basically, but happy chaos. And then Mrs. Song has this bell that she uses to signal the end of break time. So she rang her bell and everyone started going back to their seats, but they were still like talking as they went back and were sitting down and chatting a little bit. And as the conversation was kind of dying out, something happened that I didn't quite catch, but Mrs. Song suddenly raised her voice and was like, "How many times do I have to tell you not to do that?" to this one group of kids. And right when she said that, it was like an immediate, everyone went silent, staring at her, and no one said a thing, no one answered her question. And then she was like, "I'm pretty sure this is at least the 5th time that I've mentioned this. And you know that I don't like that. Why are you still doing it?" And she went on talking in a raised voice, really, really stern face, and her eyes especially were hard. You could tell that she was not happy with whatever had just happened. And she went on talking about it for about a minute. And this whole time, all the kids were silent. Most of them would like look down at their desk, or they were like fidgeting with stuff on their desk. They would not make eye contact. She would ask a lot of questions and they would just be like looking at their stuff and not looking at her. And then after she like finished talking, she said, "Man, guys, I really wanted today to be a happy day because it's the day of the birthday party, but you guys shocked me. I just can't believe this." Then she goes and walks to her desk, sits down and starts typing on her computer. And as she's typing on her computer, still silent. All you can hear are the clicking keys of the keyboard, and all the kids are still just like in their desks sitting. And so all of this made the mood, the bunigi, feel really uncomfortable and uneasy, almost like the kids were scared to do anything that would set her off again. And that was a super sharp contrast to how it was before. And in this example, what I gathered that really affected the kids' reaction was Mrs. Song's tone, her facial expression, and also the words that she said. And so the kids picked up on that, like she said, that they know what she's thinking and they acted accordingly. And I saw this happen lots of other times. That was just the most poignant example that I could think of. There were positive instances, negative instances, but the kids would pick up on her mood and then react to that. But then that got me thinking, why are they reacting in the way that they're reacting? Why are they accommodating her emotion? Why do they respond in the way that she wants them to? And to go to the next one. In the interviews that I did with the teachers, they kind of touched on this a little bit too. So Mrs. Song talked about how she shows the kids individual interest and tries to build rapport with them in various ways. And the most important part is that without the rapport, the rules don't work. And then Ms. Han touched on the same thing. She was talking about why the kids change their behavior when she expresses disappointment. And she said, because they love me and I love them, so they don't want to see me disappointed. And so from this, and also all of the evidence that I saw in class that Mrs. Song has a good relationship with her students, it seems to me that the good relationship that she has contributes a lot to the control she has over the classroom mood. because the students receive the care from her and they generally treat her with respect, and because of that respect, that's the reason why they accommodate her emotions, and then it gets transferred into the community of the room as a whole. And I say all of that knowing that I need to analyze more and probably go more in depth, but that is my initial hypothesis. And I think it would be really good to do more study cross-culturally or in other classrooms to see if there are specific Korean elements involved in this, or if it is just a general thing in classrooms, but that's where I'm at right now.
Like, there is a kind of reciprocity between teacher and students to make a good community, right? So I'm just wondering, what elements do they exchange each other? So that is the, maybe you will find it through the data after next month, but you me any big thought of that?
Like, what are they exchanging?
Yeah, because you said that the students reacted to the teacher's mood, right? Teacher's feeling or emotions, right? It assumes that they have a some kind of a reciprocal relationship, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can tell me if this answers your question or not, but I would say that it would start with Mrs. Song doing something or like smiling at them or using a stern voice, and then their reaction could be smiling back. Their reaction could be being quiet or something like that, and then it goes back to Mrs. Song, who
Yeah.
reacts to their reaction,
right.
and then it's like a circle
So
type.
what, and a question that I have now is, what is the logic for the kind of reaction? So the authority or hierarchy, does it work there? Or this kind of rapport that she mentioned, that is enough, rapport is enough to explain the kind of reaction? Or you think you found the other case?
I would say right now that the rapport probably would be the biggest factor I could see. The fact that it starts with Mrs. Song shows some kind of authority, I think. But I think because of the rapport, that's why there is some kind of exchange going on. I don't. I don't think that's.
So I kind of, maybe the flip side question, which is like to think more about why did they become problematic in the first place? Right, so, you've got the whole, they know how I think, right? And, you know, in a perfect world, then you have those, they know what she expects of them and they do what she expects of them. But here they don't. And this is the fifth time they've done this thing. Fifth time they've done this thing wrong, right? So obviously, there have been multiple times when they keep doing this. So one would be, it would be good to know what the thing is. Cause, so if you could, if there's any way you could sort of gladly ask them about, oh, remember that day when you said this is the time you've done this? What was that? It'd be good to know what was the breach, so that you can understand a little bit more when there's a breakdown of reciprocity. So it sounds like, you know, that seems something that we're familiar with kids growing up, but it seems like the part that you do seem to say is kind of uniquely Korean is the correction. How quick and total the correction is. There aren't kids that are still goofing around or anything. And it seems like once she says this is serious, everybody's serious. And then we quickly change. So that, I think that's really interesting. It does feel like there's some niches in them. But Johnny was about.
All right. My topic was on the low-income elderly, their dependence on institutional care, their feelings of disconnect, and memories of childhood. And the research questions that I've been having are, how do the low-income elderly sustain themselves, and what role does institutional care play in their survival? And the next question is, what is the elderly perception of the younger generation, and what memories do they have of connecting with the elderly in their youth? And so for my data corpus, for my last 8 weeks of observation, I've been going to Anna's house, Tapco Park, Yaksu Senior Welfare Center, and Songnam Senior Welfare Center. I spent most of my time at Anna's house in Tapco Park. And while I was there, I spent time talking to the low-income elderly who went to those places for free meals. And at the elderly care institutions, I also was able to interview and talk with some staff and a manager of one of the welfare places. And so what I have been focusing on is, what is the elderly perception and experience with government care? What's the importance of charity-run meal services to the elderly? What are the elderly perceptions of the younger generation? And what memories do they have of being mindful of the elderly in their youth? And so my methods for this was, I conducted around 100 semi-structured interviews with mostly elderly people. And I also did participant observation by spending time at Anna's house in Tapco Park, serving the elderly at Anna's house, and also delivering meals to elderly with another service. And I also had a Qualtrics survey that I was distributing as well. And so for my data presentation, first I'd like to, you can go to the next slide. This is a graph from the OECD that talks about how Korea is among the highest percent of Korea has a high percent of low-income elderly, and it's at 39%. It's among the highest of developed countries. And so that's like really important to understand going into this. And so next, this is just some responses I got about the responsibility of government. And so I'll just read them for you. Many elderly people today worked hard for their nations. They should have better care. I worked hard when I was young to build the country. We put the seed on the ground and added fertilizer. And so these three, it was kind of a common theme that the elderly talked about, how they helped build the country because they were there at the beginning of when South Korea was formed. And so they feel like their government has an obligation, not necessarily a responsibility, to care for the elderly. Go to the next one. And so next, the importance of charity-run meals to the elderly. I put this picture on here because I wanted to give you a visual image of what it's like. This is a rainy day at Tapco Park, and this is the line of the elderly waiting for free meals. And these people usually arrive like 1 or even 2 hours before. And so they even came in the rain. And to me, that demonstrates how important this meal is to them. Next, I also spent time at Anna's house, and they gave me some of their statistics that they have gathered. Since they opened in 1999, the number of elderly people that come to Anna's house has increased significantly. In 1999, it was around 22%. Now it's at 89%. And it's not, Anna's house isn't specifically for elderly people. It's just like a free meal service for people who need it. Next slide. And then talking with the elderly, these are some of their responses on why it's important to them. If it weren't for places like this, many elderly people would die. If I didn't get this meal, it would be hard to get by. I do receive pensions, and I even had money saved up, but it's not enough to get by. $300 is not enough, so I come here. So the elderly all talk about how they rely on this meal in order to get by. Moving on to the elderly perceptions of the younger generation, I noticed that there were a variety of perceptions of the younger generation, whether positive or negative, but they all seem to revolve around like a general disconnect between the elderly and younger generations. And so the negative perceptions, for example, one man said, back then was the time when the elderly were respected, and now is the time when they're not. Young people today use smartphones and pretend they don't see you, so they don't give their seats to the elderly. The younger generation is breaking down. When you ride the buses or trains, they don't give their seats up anymore. And so this is like the negative. Now moving to the positive, The younger generation today still shows respect to the elderly very well. Life is hard, so sometimes it's hard to do so, but young people today have a desire to do so. The younger generation is struggling too. They can't get jobs. Young people are super busy with their own lives. And so these all talk about a similar theme of like the young people are just really busy right now, and that's why there's this disconnect. And so it's kind of interesting. Next, moving on to memories of the elderly and being mindful of the elderly in their youth. Go to the next one. So here are some memories that some people had. The oldest people would always come first, and the children would come last. If there was any good food, it would always go to the elderly first. We didn't have a lot of rice, but we did have a lot of barley, so the elderly would get the rice and the barley would go to the children. Back then, you had to greet the elderly when they passed by. If you had a disagreement with an elderly person, you had the right to agree with them. You had to agree with them, whether you were right or wrong. And so these are just some memories that the elderly people have of connecting with the elderly in their youth. And then next, I kind of started to notice that a lot of these people lived through the Korean War. They were children during the Korean War. And when they talked about when they were young, and like the elderly, they would talk about this like gratefulness towards their parents and the elderly. And I thought it was really significant. There were a lot of worries in the world during the war. If your parents died, you became orphans. My generation treated the older generation like the heavens because we knew how hard it was for them during the Korean War and Japanese occupation. I was 8 or 9 when the Korean War broke out. I don't like to think about that time because I was almost like an orphan. Young people today don't understand because they only read about it. I can still remember the sounds of bombs falling and planes flying overhead. Young people don't understand how hard life was during the Korean War. Even now, I think back on my parents. Back then, no matter how much you got for your monthly pay, you gave it all to your parents. Back then, if you didn't treat your father with respect, you'd be punished. And so they all talk about this feeling of like loving their parents and the elderly, because if they didn't have them, then they would be orphans. And there was this risk of losing them during the Korean War. So then my conclusion is that South Korea has a large population of low-income elderly who depend on free meals and institutional care, whether it be government or charities, in order to sustain themselves. These elderly people report feeling disconnected from today's younger generation and have memories of being more mindful of the elderly when they were young.
Why do they arrive an hour or two before meals are passed out?
Because they want to get in line, because there's only a limited number of meals that they hand out. Specifically at that one, at Tapco Park, there's like 4 places that you can get meals from.
Yeah.
But that specific one, they arrive pretty early because there's only like, can't remember the exact number, I have it, but there's like
Food good there?
it's like pre-made meals.
Okay.
But usually the
Nice.
elderly people get that food, and some people go over to the other lines to get another meal to bring with them.
What do you think about the argument that the government have a responsibility for them? This is something that's often frowned upon in American culture when people say that, talk about entitlements that they have, you know.
I'm not sure exactly if I can give a proper response to that, but my response would be that I do really feel for these elderly people because they helped build Korea. And now I was able to observe many of them just waiting in a park, and it almost feels like they've been forgotten. And I've noticed that Korea has a lot of like national treasures, but I feel like the elderly people are the real national treasures for Korea.
That's awesome. I think you should make that your thesis somehow.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I just did, basically.
Said,
Okay, so, I feel like I'm perfect to follow up with Jacob, because I feel like there's some similarities. But my question more or less is, what is kimchi culture today and how does sonmat fit into that? And then I'll first just give some descriptions that you guys kind of know. I mean, everyone knows what kimchi is, but specifically the sonmat, because that was even hard for me to find a kind of exact definition of what it was. So, well, okay, first I'll do my data corpus, but so I just did a lot of interviews, talked to people. I went to museums, like the museum Chikan, specifically in the agricultural museum. The rice museum has been closed, so I could go to that one. But I also asked a lot of questions, and I went to a lot of restaurants to be able to see, because everyone eats food, believe it or not. I kind of was able to observe that in all the spaces that I was in. And it was also really helpful for us to travel to all different areas of Korea, because I could see either the similarities or the differences just across the country and not just in Seoul. And so I had about, I think, 4 or 5 interviews. I have another one on Friday, tomorrow. And then I did a lot of casual conversation and asking questions. And then, yeah, I get just the persistent observation. What people were eating, how they were eating it, when they were eating it, etc. And then, so here for the definitions. Kimchi, as you all know, is typically red fermented cabbage, right? But there are actually 200 or maybe a little more than 200 distinct kinds of kimchi, which I've only been here for 2 months and definitely cannot distinguish what is kimchi and what isn't kimchi, and I'm still trying to learn that. It's actually very, very difficult, because it can be both fermented and not fermented, be fresh. And there's lots of different ingredients. It can have red pepper and the gochu powder. It can also have no red pepper in it, so it's a little bit hard to distinguish, but I did my best. And so mat, literally translated, is hand taste. So being hand, mat being taste. And to put it into a way that's kind of easy to digest, it's like what nostalgia tastes like. It's like the flavor of nostalgia, if you will. So basically food that is described as like sonmat is typically food that's delicious, it's good, so it's a compliment to this food has sonmat. But food that is bought from a store, mass produced, etc., cannot and does not have sonmat. Also, you can't just follow a recipe and say that it has sonmat because well, this is how someone in the past made it and I followed it exactly, therefore it has sonmat. There's actually emotion that is put into food to give it sonmat. So there is a lot of ways to make kimchi, and there are different kinds of making kimchi. These pictures just show that at Alyssa's homestay, we had her mom, I don't know her name, I forgot her name, but she had us make a summer kimchi, a fresh kimchi, and she said this is the easy kimchi. And so this is just the process of us making it. And these pots here are actually called ongi. They're the traditional pots that you would ferment things in, not just kimchi, but a lot of fermented things, because they're really good at temperature regulation, as these be buried in the ground. They don't always bury them in that distinguishment. I don't know why. It could just be because people don't have places to bury them now. However, yeah, that's what those pots are. They're for fermenting foods. And I've had a lot of people say that store-bought is better. Ironically enough, even though store-bought doesn't have sonmat, but their homemade or their mother's has the sonmat, has the nostalgia, has the memories, and so it's just different. If you will, with kimjang, that's where they make it, and this is the main social aspect of kimchi. It is when everyone gets together and they make kimchi. But the change that we're seeing and how kimchi is today, kimchi culture today, is that kimjang is not practiced as commonly as it used to be,
due to people having less time. There is also smaller families was one of the main things that people kept talking about. They have small families or they live alone, and because Kim Jong is such a big ordeal, they don't really have the means to do it all by themselves. It's also more expensive. I'm sure people know, like, making anything from scratch is almost like a luxury. Like if you crochet things at home or you make something from scratch, it's very complex. It's usually more expensive than just buying it already made. And it's the same case with kimchi and other more traditional foods that take a long time to make, such as doenjang, the soybean paste, etc. But those things all used to be made from scratch in the past. And so the elderly that I did speak to also talked about those changes and how family used to all come together, and we all used to eat our moms and our grandmas, and we used to all make it together, and now that's just not practiced. And there is this sentiment of that is a sad change, but no one has really commented on it being necessary to do anything about that change, just that it is changing. And then courtesy of, we don't know wherever she went. She said these are the rules, and Dr. Sheen agreed with these. Doing Korean, I thought this was really interesting. But it just goes to show that how integral kimchi is to Korean culture and identity, as many people have told me. However, the shift has taken out the sona in some regards, and it's just different. So they haven't stopped eating kimchi. They're not gonna stop eating kimchi, but it has just changed, as most things have with the modernity of their culture. So as you can see, they eat it with everything. There are also lots of different forms, and I couldn't tell you all of which ones are kimchi and aren't kimchi, but I do know that in relation to soma, the things that take longer to make have more soma, and the things that are really easy and fast to make have less. I.e. street food and those quick snacks don't really have soma, but something like a fermented kimchi would. For example, this is like called a water kimchi. You don't recall if this one was fermented, but I mean, jokes on here if it was fermented or not, but again, it's eaten with everything, as you guys know, and there's a million different forms of it, and it ranges by region and ingredients vary. But yeah, super important. And then just more for the soma, the panchans that are fermented or take a little while to make are considered to have soma in them. And then this would be like doenjang, gochujang, etc. And these things always be made by hand by people in the past, and now they're really not. And in fact, people of our generation say that it's better, better from the store. And even Alyssa's home state, one of her daughters said, like, it's not good to make it from scratch. She was like, yeah, it's bad. Like, you gotta get it from the store. That's the only way it's good. Which is really interesting. But what I make of the data is just that there is a super rich culinary heritage here in Korea, and it is not going to go away, but it is going to keep changing. And due to smaller families, low birth rates, education fever, just the busyness of life that is here in Korea, and this ambitious culture that they have here, things like sonma and those more handmade traditional foods are becoming more foods of convenience, foods of fast food, if you will, and they aren't traditionally fast foods. They take time, they take love, they take energy, but we don't see that being put to the food anymore just because people don't have the time nor the knowledge to know how to do so. But Koreans still love their Korean food, and that's not going to change.
So, questions on things like, how do you know someone is the flavor of nostalgia? You kind of said that.
Because that's what people tell me it is.
Okay, so we need to see your data. So I didn't see much data. So like quotes, it could be summaries of this many people said this, but we need data, firsthand data. Most of what we saw are more conclusions rather than the original data. So keep working on getting the data that will, the quotations, what exactly and who said it, so that we can start to.
Yeah, I have that. I just didn't put in.
Yeah. So that's crucial.
To our professors. So if you say that, 손맛 is a taste of flavor of nostalgia, right? And I see that your claim is kind of, 손맛 working to decreasing, right? That if you said that 손맛 is a taste of nostalgia, the nostalgia cannot be decreased or disappear, right?
Well, how's been explained to me is like when I talked to the professor yesterday, the professor, he was like, food won't have sonma if it was learned from like a YouTube video or a recipe book. If someone in 20 years from now who's my age and now they're an adult, well, not that we're not adults, but like they have kids, they have a family, they want to learn how to make these things. If they learn it from a YouTube video and they didn't know like the taste before, it won't have sonma, it'll be different.
Okay,
That's how it's explained. I don't know. Yeah,
all right, okay.
still trying to wrap my head around it as well.
Okay. Stick to your, I just recommend you to your data
Okay.
and then stay those wise. Okay. All right.
You know, if Brittany's on her way.
Yeah, they said that they were in the subway, they're about like 10 minutes away. So hopefully it happens to where I close and they open the door.
Yeah.
Cause that would be majestic as fetch.
Let's make it.
Majesty, but same amount of majesty that'll be in that.
Majesty and fetch.
At worst, if you end early, where I can ask the questions you wanted to ask to everyone and catch up on the.
That's true. You have your list of questions you can ask.
Yeah.
Cool. My topic is on Buddhism and foreign visitor interactions in Buddhist temples. And my research question, and thank you, Charlotte, I used your photo for this next slide. It's so pretty. But my research questions, I give you the credit, but I didn't ask you, so I. But how do foreign visitors navigate ritual participation in Korean Buddhist temples? And how do temple practitioners respond to potential breaches in etiquette? And do temple practitioners use nunchi toward foreign visitors who breach the temple etiquette? So my methods and my data. I went to Gyeongseong-sa Temple and Jogae-sa Temple. For this entire time, I've been at Jogae-sa Temple, and then halfway through the field school, I was able to enter into my second field site at Gyeongseong-sa. I observed at both places Buddhist rituals being practiced by practitioners, as well as foreign visitor interactions within these temples. And who I talked to, I had 30 plus informal to semi-structured interviews. I would say I had about 7 very formal interviews amongst the 30, a lot of this number being foreign visitors at the temples that I was able to converse with while they were there. I talked with students, volunteers, monks, and practitioners as well. And I was able to gain 4 key informants, 2 of them at Jogae-sa Temple and 2 of them at Gyeongseong-sa Temple. This is Polly, and sorry, that's at Gyeongseong-sa Temple. This is Jung-hee and Sung-young. And they invited Brinley and I over to Jung-hee's home to have a traditional Korean meal, which was a very special moment. And it was a good sign to me that we had entered into the community and really been accepted. And this is them in the Foreign Visitors Information Center at Jogae-sa Temple, which is where we were able to do a lot of interviews and where I was able to see a lot of foreign visitors enter in to ask questions. And that is something common that I saw, was that foreign visitors, when they noticed the building, would come and ask a lot of questions. This was my very first field note in Korea. This is an excerpt from it. It says, a foreigner walked in, not through the sides like is customary, but straight through the center windows, took a picture of the statue, walked up to the 3rd row and took a picture of the 3 big Buddhas. If anyone else around me thought this was disrespectful, I could not tell. No one paid him any attention. So this, if you want to go to the next slide, this is a video of this happening. It should, yeah, okay. Oh, my bad. It played in the Google slide last time. No. Okay, that's okay. Well, it's a video of him doing this. So he walks in through the main window, and you can see him. He's right here. And the thing that I wanted to show you all through that video was the genuine 0 response from the practitioners. He walks up and is standing right in front. He walks up to right here in this pillar. if you can see it. And there are 3 practitioners that are right behind him. And they're not looking at him trying to get his attention to move him away, but instead they just continued on with their meeting as if he wasn't even there. And so my main questions that I got from this first interaction I had at the temple, the very first day I was there, was how do the foreigners interact with the rituals and what happens when they breach that etiquette? And I want to focus on the second question, so I kind of went quick on this first question. This is an interview that I had with Jonghi, and this is an excerpt from my field notes. It says, foreigners are often welcomed when they respectfully participate in the rituals, sitting quietly, bowing, observing prostrations. Jonghi expressed that this type of participation is not only acceptable, but appreciated. They are looking for authentic Buddhism, and I try to show them this. And she goes on later in that interview that we had to say that foreigners, when they ask her questions, they're looking for authentic Buddhism. So in the next question, what is a normal reaction to foreigners breaking etiquette? This is a moment that happened this past week in the main Dharma hall at Jogasa Temple. I was there during the prayer hours, which are during the middle of the day, and I was in the corner of the main hall, which is something I do often during those prayer hours. I will stand in the corner so I'm not intrusive in the space, and I will observe. And there was an older foreign gentleman that was in the back of the aisleway. And the room got very crowded, and mats started to be placed in the aisleway, and the room got so crowded that we ended up leaving. But the thing I want to mention that is specific to the data about this interaction is that the etiquette that was broken was no foreigners were supposed to be inside the main Dharma hall during those midday prayers. That's a sign on the side door. But we were not acknowledged whatsoever for being in there. The only reason we were drawn out was because it was overcrowded. And the thing that struck me was I've been in that main room for many times, many sessions of prayer sessions, and I've never been asked to leave, and no one has actually paid me nearly any attention. And in an interview with Oli at Gyeongsungsa, my other site, she described when I described my interest in Nunchi and practitioners giving it to foreign visitors. If you want to go to the next slide, sorry. She says this. That does not happen here. It does not happen in a temple state environment because they are a customer. And to clarify, if practitioners also view foreign visitors as customers in this environment, she said, yes, they do, but sometimes old ladies will give nunchi, but it's not common. And I found this also particularly interesting and something I want to look further into within my data. Not that I have yet. I want to go further into my field notes to see if I can find other instances of temple stay visitors being seen as customers within the environment, because this is what Polly said in my interview. And in another interview with a female monk at Jogasa Temple, so at my other site, when I asked directly if nunchi is given to foreign visitors when they break temple etiquette, she said, no, there is no need. We know that they do not understand. I said, then, like, even if there are signs saying that you should not do these things, and she said, we correct people when they don't take off their shoes right away because we do want to keep the hall clean. But other times we do not need to give nunchi even when there is a sign. And I found this particularly interesting as well and important because the concept of not understanding, the foreigners seeming as ignorant and not understanding, not necessarily ignorant, they never said that in my data, but the concept of not understanding came up often. So because foreigners don't understand the proper etiquette normally within the temple, they aren't as needed to give nunchi because they are seen as not part of that community. And so in conclusion, foreign visitors navigate ritual participation through following Korean practitioners. And this is something I wasn't able to discuss further in this presentation, but I do have data on, and I need to present that better next time. But the thing that was presented in this was that through the aid of temple volunteers and workers, they were able to understand ritual participation. And overall, temple practitioners do not give nunchi to foreign visitors who break etiquette within the temple. This is a generalized statement. I do believe there are instances of that, and foreign visitors are viewed as customers rather than temple guests within temple state environments.
Well, I think before you had a thing on ritual spaces, and I think that would be really good to bring back. Sort of like, what are the requirements for all the different spaces, particularly the ones that are liable to be broken by foreigners, right? So it'd be good to have the introduction that there's signs that say, don't take pictures inside the Dharma hall. For somebody that's not this group, right, that they wouldn't know that what a breach of etiquette, like that's a huge breach. And sort of kind of document what are the expectations of behavior in the different places and the way that there are these sort of kind of spaces are kind of marked out as like, you don't do this here, and the shoes, just sort of give a little list that marks that out. So that, yeah, especially the ones that'll get broken.
Right. That's like the first half of my field school is all that data.
Yeah.
And so I did
So you
have
got
that.
Yeah, you just need to get it up there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, think about the categories of visitors, right? Like the categories of people that come through. I think that would be an interesting thing. It's like, you've got some categories that are kind of interesting. I don't know if there's differences in lay practitioner categories. I mean, there's obviously monk and lay practitioner, but are there different kinds of lay practitioners? That's not crucial to what you're doing, but it might be interesting just to flesh that out a little bit more. But you have foreign visitors, you have paying customers.
Yes.
Right? Those are kind of two different categories. They're treated differently.
Yes.
And then I think you are an honorary non-foreigner, right? So then there's this other category of people who are like, yeah, we know them. They're okay, so they don't have to follow the rule. I mean, I assume that's what's happening sometimes, or is it just that the rule isn't, so that would be a question.
Yeah.
When this whole thing about letting you be in the main Dharma hall during prayers, is that because they're just not giving Nuchi, right? Like she says, a lot of times you don't need to give, you just don't give Nuchi, you don't bother, or is it because you're okay? You know, is it that you're not okay there and they're just not giving you Nuchi, or is it that you're okay?
To answer that, I feel like it is more toward the side of just no Nuchi to foreign visitors because of the complete unacknowledged, like no acknowledgement whatsoever of my being there. Most of the time, practitioners amongst themselves will acknowledge the presence of each other, but I was more of a fly on the wall than like honorary. He's allowed to be here, at least from my impressions. It could be otherwise. I would need to ask.
I think your tech has a potential to see to whom she works, right? So, which is really interesting to me. So you said that the foreign people at campus space are out of the scope of Nuchi because they are customers, right? So it makes me think about then to whom Nuchi works, right? So yeah, maybe you can find some something.
And there's also somebody said, they don't get it, they won't understand.
Right. Yeah. That was the female monk at Jogas has said they don't understand, so there's no need. That is interesting though. Are you saying that maybe this could be like customers outside of temples, like in general, customers don't receive Nuchi? Or is your question more
So I don't know, but you know, the Nuchi can be applied to the people of the community or people who have some sense of the social norms, something like that. But I found that in Sergio's case or Bella's case, that people began to people share the Nuchi, right? But that Nuchi does not apply to this temple space, right? So I'm just wondering what happens to two different cases.
right? And I think that would be something to look further into for sure, is to figure out like, because we have the data from my interview for saying it's because they're a customer, but what does a customer mean?
Yeah.
Like how do you get classified as a customer? And that's something I wish I had more time to look into. Right.
Did I make it here? They gotta be close. So
Questions by Greg.
yeah, general comments and things. One big thing is I think you're about to, that time where you can turn the corner and not have questions at the beginning of your presentation. So next time you do presentations, you don't need questions. You can move to claims, like what did you find? What are you saying? What do your data have to say?
That's good, because I just made up the questions that fit the claim anyways.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Sometimes that's part of the problem too, to get rid of them, then get rid of worrying about it, and then move on to say what your data have to say.
Want us to do a research question? Yeah, I thought.
I did it.
And he's saying not be involved.
I'm saying it's
You
time.
get to step out of the ball pit.
You've
Everyone
you've
after
developed.
So now we're gonna review the answer.
No, no.
No, yeah.
Oh, we don't talk about the question.
You move too fast.
Maybe half as majestic as that.
We're graduating.
Can I make a?
Yeah, Johnny has general comments.
You guys have good presentations. The one thing that this isn't to anyone in particular, but the most interesting presentations, from my experience and like from my field, or my, what's it called? Thesis presentations, whatever, are the ones that they have like 2 or 3 really good ethnographic stories, and then like kind of throw in a very well, I mean, you're not at that point yet because you haven't had time with your data, but throw in the conclusions and the analysis briefly. The best, I mean, you guys all know Sarai very well. Sarai is a really good storyteller, and learning how to tell stories like that is what made like her presentation really interesting, makes all her presentations really interesting. So if you guys want to get better at presentation, try to like think back about, I spent time with Sarai, she does good stuff. So try to figure out how to be a good storyteller, and that'll make you a better presenter.
Thank you. Interesting stories.
But even if the story isn't inherently like super interesting, like
You can tell it well.
sure, you can, if you are a good storyteller, you can take something that's mediocre and make it sound super interesting and make people involved.
So some of it is you're kind of still fumbling around for what your data have to say. Once you figure out what your data have to say, then the thing is you can say, what is a story that can show that? Right? What is the story that can show what the data have to say in general? And then you front that, right? And that's what you'll do in your thesis too, is you'll put that up front so that it'll pull the reader into, okay, here's the interesting, curious thing that happened, that you know, provokes some questions, and then you can spend the rest of the time sort of addressing those questions. Yeah.
You're writing time.
You can go first.
Yeah.
You can go first.
Okay.
While Denise gets set up, I'll say one other thing is, so I know a lot of you, very few of you are planning on going on to do anthropology in graduate school. And I support that 100%. For those that haven't told you that yet, I
Not
think
because he doesn't like grad school, just not for us.
no, that's not it. No, I actually think that not all cases, grad school in anthropology is going to be valuable for you. So, and I talked about this with individual people, quite a bit. And it's not to say, yeah, I think you all would do fantastically in a grad school in anthropology. The point is that it isn't super valuable unless you want to go into academia or something. There are some other cases, and just so you know, I'm happy to chat with all of you about this. That's not the point. The point here is that what you want to be doing is you want to be getting the value of anthropology for understanding the world. I really believe there is something useful about the way that anthropology makes you think about problems in the world to get leverage on it. And I'm not seeing it all here yet. So this is what we'll have to work on next semester, is to figure out how can we get some kind of, you know, what I call an anthropological analytic that can give you a way of seeing the thing you're studying and seeing it in a new way, where something pops out and you reveal some kind of way of understanding that's valuable and useful. that's the stuff that's gonna be important regardless of whether or not you go into anthropology, which, like I said, most of you won't. Regardless of whether or not you're going to, whatever you're doing in life, it will be useful to have in your toolkit of ways of understanding the world, you'll have this anthropological thing you can do where you'll look at a problem and be able to offer new and unique insight into it. Okay, so that's your task, and that's what you'll be doing the next 6 months, trying to figure that out. All right, Denise, how come you're not up here?
Get up here.
Be up here. On to the last two.
Cute shirt, Denise. Thanks. Awesome.
There we go.
And I'll have you like kind of jump forward and back a bit, so I'll just tell you backward. Okay,
He's good at that.
yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, and Johnny, we trust. Okay, am I gonna start? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, my name is Denise Sanchez, and most of my field study here in South Korea was focused in English in South Korea. Thanks. And so I want to go a little over the places that I had mostly focused my research on. So firstly, I went to Sangam University. I was there twice a week for 2 weeks. And then I also went to a class called English Connect by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints out in Gangnam. I attended once a week for 6 weeks. And then I also went to an elementary school out in Yuwon. And I attended there 3 times a week for about 5 weeks by the end of this field study. I was able to meet and interview quite a few different people at Sangyeon. Since it's mostly elementary school students, I did not interview the elementary students. But I was able to interview about 20-year-olds here at Sangyeon, and then also about 50 to 70-year-olds in English Connect. And so my leading research question is, and it kind of started out a little bit more with education aspiration, with how does what they want to do fulfill what they're going to do. But as I've been out here, it's actually changed a little bit more as I've focused a little bit more on English. And so it's changed to how is English learning experienced by Korean students in the context of education favor, which is mostly, you can jump forward, in regards to how the desire that Koreans have to pursue education and, you know, have that be a means that they want to be proud. And there's a lot of history behind that. You can talk to me about it after if you want. But the methodology that I mostly used was participant observation, and I did a few interviews as well. And so continuing on with my data, I was able to, I'm going to talk about these individually, and then I'm also going to demonstrate the picture as I'm talking. But with Sangyeong University, I was able to actually interview a couple of the students, and I was able to learn a little bit more of what they did to prepare for university, kind of what that looked like for them, and a bit more of how that is going to help them later on in their careers. I have also been able to observe 5th and 6th graders out in the elementary school in Nuwon, and pretty much this is also going to show the pathway of what the skills level that they're at could influence later on as they continue on with their education. And then I'll tie this back into some other things, but I also did want to touch base on an English class experience that I had that I titled Studies Opportunity. And then also touch base, if I have time, for the extras, which include not official field sites, but places that I wanted to go to. And so we can jump forward now. So I want to touch base. Rebecca and Sunny are the 2 people I'm going to be talking about, and these are their English names. They actually do have Korean names, but this is something that they have to be able to connect with English speakers. And so Rebecca, actually, when I was interviewing her, had let me know a little bit more what she had done to be able to prepare for college. So when she was in middle school, there was 2 different pathways that they could choose from: mathematics and science or humanities. And so after speaking to her and her major, she was mostly focused on humanities because that's where she had more strength in, and she was really good at history. And so that's going to be important because now I'm going to talk about something else, but I'll tie it back. Okay, so pretty much right here, what we can see is actually one of the activities that we did at the elementary school. And so it's very simple sentence structure, starting with, today I am going to visit the museum. This weekend, I am going to see a musical. Very simple basis. And this is actually something that the 6th graders had done. But something really interesting is that this activity was mostly focused on speaking and listening. And so they had gone around, practiced with each other, and done this as a practice. Some of the students were a bit slower in, speaking and talking and applying what they learned, versus others were able to have just a quick conversation and move on. Next. So right here, we can actually see a little bit more of what the fifth graders were doing. Specifically, this class right here was 5-1. And so in this class, there's a little girl, I'm going to name her Sue. And she actually is really, really good at conversing in English. And her skill level is pretty high. So she actually did most of this work. They worked together in groups, and she was able to mostly do the writing in English. Meanwhile, her classmates were the ones who were doing mostly in Hangul or Korean. And so this is a little bit more of the skill level that she's at, where she was able to help prepare the recipe that they were going to do for cooking. Now, considering this observation of where she's pretty strong at, I have not been able to observe her in some of the other subjects, but with English especially, compared to a lot of her other peers, it wouldn't be hard to tell if later on in the future, because she's really good at English, would choose humanities. Now, this is something that is really impactful, is because what I was able to learn from these students here at Sangin University is what you choose in middle school then determines the path that you're going to take in college, and then what college you go to then also affects the type of job that you're able to get in the future. And so all this kind of has a collision impact. Now, the reason I kind of bring this up in the large demographic is, well, actually, I want to touch base on Sunny really quick. So Sunny is actually about 60 years old in English Connect, and she pursued English pretty seriously and actually became an English teacher. And I asked her what her motivation now was to continue learning, because she is just a very humble student. And one of the main things she said was to be humble, to be practiced, to practice it. But when I talked to her a little bit more about her past experiences, she told me that it was always pushed as a child on her to continue looking for opportunities. So that way she could continue on and continue learning. And so while I was at church, I was actually able to talk to a mom, and she actually was able to tell me that her 3-year-old son was already learning English in a separate academy, opposed to the main school that he was going to. And not only that, when we were actually in Jeju, I was able to observe and see that there's actually a mother with 2 kids, and they ranged from like 3 to 5 years old, probably no older than 5. And she was telling them like, oh, like they speak English to some of our students here, like they can speak, like, and she was encouraging them to talk to us. And so this is like something that she was personally proud of, and that I could see reflected in the education fever. And so, next, Johnny. This is a little bit of the examples of the test questions that they're able to do later on as they go out to university. This is what sentence doesn't fit chronological order that they're trying to do. And so this is essentially what these 3-year-olds and what these little kids are going to be preparing for as they grow up. And so, next slide. Later on, this is kind of the claim that I've come to conclusion. So in the context of Korea's education fever, the early and widespread practice of supplemental English education reflects not only academic pressure, but also the importance attached to English proficiency as a gateway to success on the national exam. And next slide. Does anybody have any questions?
So one thing with the data presentation, be good to know, how many people do you interview at each age? You mentioned the ages and the different places, and, to get more concrete with the numbers there. But I think, yeah, the big question is gonna be how to integrate across those different kinds of data, right? The 3 different, very different groups, which makes it really interesting data. And yeah, I think it'd be better to keep them differentiated rather than kind of to put them too much together. And try and figure out what did each one have to say. Well, what's the story for each of those groups? Maybe that would be a way to think about it, at least initially.
Give us an example. So there's 2 reasons for the early and widespread practice of simplification. But it seems like these 2 reasons are connected. Because they want to succeed as an exam. Like they have hard pressure with the children.
Oh, I forgot one thing. That's probably something that's not connecting. Sorry. I forgot to mention that, the sixth graders, this big difference between the fifth and sixth graders is that the sixth graders are starting comp ones. And so there's also a visible difference that you're able to see, between how the fifth graders are acting at school and how they're learning versus the sixth graders and the added academic pressure that they're already experiencing because their parents are pushing them to learn at a younger age. Whereas most of the time from the previous people that I've spoken to, mostly those in the English Connect class, so that they didn't have like additional supplemental learning until they were like later on in middle school or even high school. And so that adds on to the academic pressure that they're receiving. And it's mostly so that way their parents can prepare them for the later pathway. From what I've observed.
Quick question, so you said that speaking and listening were highlighted at the young age, right? But if they start the hot one, those two things are important to learn, or the other things like a reading or writing can be the other options that they have to learn. Is find something changed?
No, so far from what I've seen, there isn't like a very big visible difference versus like reading and writing and their verbal communication and fluency. At least within the sixth graders, they're pretty, what they're learning in class or practicing, they're able to keep up pretty well and also still converse. With what they're practicing.
Because in national exam, we don't take the exam about speaking. So that's why I'm wondering,
I also have not been able to talk to those kids because we went to Fiji last week since I got it.
Do you happen to know that Korea also has English kindergarten? Yes, so they do have kindergarten that speaks only English. And I personally think that that's also a big problem in our society. Because they're not learning Korean first, they're learning English first. Then, so I think that will also contribute a lot in your research, that you can also add. Write it down.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Brinley. Oh, Brinley.
But I have a question too. Yeah.
Do you think learning English kind of supports Western supremacy?
That's actually something really interesting. I didn't present on that because I've been told that it is not very relevant, but, pretty much from what I've seen is a reason that a lot of these kids are in the belief that English is important and a part of the national exam is because it's important to also be able to communicate with others in the world and be able to have that type of connection, either whether through jobs or like personal interests. And so when I've talked to a lot of the people and about their study abroad and where they wanted to go, there wasn't a lot of people who wanted to go more Western. People were okay and more so wanting to go to like Australia. Some people did want to go to the UK, but not so much for like supremacy reasons. It was very much so tied to their education. And so I wouldn't say based off what I've observed in the whole, it adds to Western students.
Australia,
Well, is Western?
yeah,
Yeah, brother, I don't know.
like the east-west culture divide, Australia is
I guess when I think of Western, I thought most of the
like in the West, yeah, which Australia gets you.
Okay, fun fact, I know that I'm not good at geography.
No, that's what I'm saying, is you are, 'cause Australia is in the east, but it still is like,
Considered Western?
yeah.
Yeah, some people had gone to Australia for a bit of time and then came to Korea again, but it wasn't so much. Their influence and ideas haven't changed from what they've grown up in. And so a lot of times it's still like they're going to major either in mathematics and humanities, not because of what they've been influenced and thinking by, but a lot of times this is what they're good at, this is what they want to do, and this is what they're going to do. And it's because their parents constantly like are telling them these things, and that's what the path they're looking for. And a lot of times they also will eventually end up ever studying abroad.
and they stay in Korea, and a lot of these people that I've talked to never left. And so a lot of their ideas are completely thinking this.
One way to think of the question is like language ideology, the way it's something that we talk about in anthropology. And so like the idea about a language oftentimes creates a hierarchy so that like, especially when kids are like, oh, English is the thing I need to learn, it can create a sort of devaluing of one's own language, right? So that English is the cool, important, whatever valuable thing, and Korean is the low value. And so it sounds like you're saying that you don't think that's happening, where English is being valued over Korean, or?
No, I think there's more of a push for the importance of English still, because even in an interview that I had, this guy, he was an English major, and his English was really great. Meanwhile, his friend, when I tried to include her to be a part of like the interview, refused to just in general speak or even try and attempt English. And to her, she was like, no, I'm really good at math. Like that was her forte. She's not even going to try.
But does that create a valuation of English language over Korean language, Western culture over Korean culture?
Well, that's what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah.
See more as a subject.
See more as a what?
As a subject like math.
Oh,
It's not really like
you don't think,
language
okay.
importance.
yeah,
And so that's why I mean, like, in comparison, this was the mindset that these people have, and even the younger elementary students also, I can see treated that.
yeah, so that's interesting. So possibly when it becomes a subject, then it becomes a thing that doesn't have all those ideological ramifications. So that seems like an interesting hypothesis.
And I don't think that a lot of times, their proficiency in English and how good they are in English, I've seen is mostly personal desires. And so those are the people who excel in that. And it's not seen as
That
like,
doesn't necessarily mean it's not ideological. It doesn't have that ideological valence just because it's a personal desire. You know what I'm saying? So it could still, the other part seemed more convincing. You don't need that.
Yeah, even though English is treated as a subject here in Korea, I still think there are some hierarchy depending on which English you're talking about. Because there are different types of English, like Filipino English or US English or UK English.
What is the hierarchy of Englishes?
At least I think here in Korea, the US English is the highest.
Higher than British English?
Suck it, British.
I feel like,
Like the preferences, yeah.
Is
so like
in the
people
US,
mostly speak US English. Like most people think that UK is kind of cooler.
Yeah, that's
What?
also that's also because like they yeah. But I think there's definitely a society that's very much related to racism, I personally think, because many people think that Southeast Asian English accents are not. And there is definitely preferences between the parents on what kind of English accents they want to teach to their children. And so maybe that's also something you can look into, because there are definitely different types of English, and now we're just generally talking English. So, yeah.
I feel like I would be like the one in the school, which I to focus on, since most of it is more so the motivation for it, as opposed to what is doing that.
And also you say that we are learning English for our personal desire, but I also think it's very much related to job hunting. So if you want to get a job, you need to have a certain score of exam. And without that, you cannot have a job.
Yeah, I wish I could have been younger longer to gather more of that. Yeah.
Ain't that the way?
Perfect.
No, it's.
What? Oh, good.
But you need a great job to cry.
Well, Brinley.
oh. Well, do you guys have any other questions, general questions or comments?
Oh, wait.
I think we'll have food coming shortly. We'll see. I'm not sure if friendly or not. Let's see, what's the timing on food?
All them around to 1:30 and they said it's gonna take an hour or a half.
Hour or an hour and a half? Oh, okay. So we didn't order early enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
We could play a game together. Is anybody still on?
Ain't that just the way?
All right.
We don't have class next Monday,
right? I'll end it. Officially end the thing.
Well,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Save it for the. Onto the
Stuff.
consent agenda.
Thank you for those of you who joined us online. We're gonna end the Zoom right now, but thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Ricardo.
Oh my God.
Oh my